Hi, I'm Rachel, a 28-year-old single mom. I'm raising my wise 9-year-old daughter, Sophie. Before I share our story, please like and subscribe to follow our journey. 4 years ago, I met Mark, a divorced dad with 2 kids. We had a lot in common and quickly became close. Mark eventually moved in with us, and our lives merged, though we kept our finances separate. 2 months ago, Mark proposed, and we thought we were heading towards a happy future together as a blended family. But problems came up when we talked about Sophie's upcoming birthday. I wanted to buy her a pony, something she'd always wanted. Mark thought it was unfair that Sophie would get such a big gift while his kids didn't. He argued that if Sophie got a pony, his kids should get something too. I tried to explain that I was using my own money from my grandpa, and suggested we might split the cost for his kids. Mark didn't like that idea. He felt that using my money to give Sophie a pony while his kids missed out was unfair. This disagreement made me rethink our future. After my grandpa passed away, he left me a large inheritance. I set up a trust fund for Sophie to secure her future, including her education and important milestones. Mark was upset when he saw the trust papers and said it wasn't fair that Sophie would have more than his kids. One evening, Mark confronted me about the trust fund. He said that in a marriage, everything should be shared equally. I tried to explain calmly that this money was meant to ensure Sophie's security and that it was what my grandpa wanted. Mark was frustrated, saying that family means sharing everything equally. I believe family means making sure everyone is cared for in their own way. Everyone needs different things. Sophie needs this trust fund, I said, feeling the weight of my grandpa's wishes. Our argument kept going in circles, and neither of us was willing to give in. I realized this was more than just about the pony or the trust fund. It was about how we see family and fairness. When Mark stormed out of the room, the gap between us felt bigger than ever. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, her innocent smile reminded me why I made these choices. "Mom, is everything okay with Mark?" she asked, sensing the tension. I reassured her, "Everything's going to be fine, sweetheart." Even though I was unsure, the issues with Mark felt deeper than I had hoped. The next day, Mark found the trust fund papers and confronted me while I was cleaning up after dinner. His face showed confusion and anger. "What is this, Rachel? Why does Sophie get a trust fund, and my kids get nothing? Is this what you've been hiding?" His words hurt, but I tried to stay strong. "It's not about hiding anything, Mark. It's about securing Sophie's future, which my grandpa wanted for her. This money is a promise I made to him," I explained. Mark scoffed and threw the papers on the kitchen table. "So, your promises to your grandfather are more important than our future together? What about my kids? Don't they deserve the same security?" "I'm not saying they don't," I said. "This money is from my family and meant for Sophie. I thought you understood that. But we're supposed to become one family, Rachel. How can you say you love me but plan a future that makes my kids seem less important?" His voice was raised, filling the room with tension. "I do love you, Mark, but I can't go against my grandfather's wishes or compromise Sophie's future. That doesn't mean I don't care about your kids," I said. "Rachel, you're being selfish. You're only thinking about your daughter, not our whole family," Mark said, clearly upset. His fists clenched. "Is it selfish to want to protect my daughter? Wouldn't you do the same for your kids if you were in my position?" I shot back, feeling my own frustration rising. Our argument touched on every sensitive topic and challenged every decision. The next few days were tense, filled with silent meals and closed doors. Our home, once full of laughter and shared dreams, now felt like a battleground. One evening, as I tried to relax on the couch and watch TV, Mark sat down next to me with a serious look. "We need to talk, Rachel. This situation is tearing us apart," he said. "I know, Mark, but what do you want me to do? Give up on my daughter's future just to make things feel fair? That's not right either," I replied. "It's not just about feeling fair, it's about being fair. Sophie will have a better start in life than my kids. How can we be a family if there's this inequality between us?" Mark said. His words made me think about fairness, family, and love. It wasn't just about money, it was about our values, dreams, and our future as a family. As I looked at Mark, seeing his genuine concern and pain, I wondered if our love was strong enough to overcome our differences. The tension between us grew each day, turning every conversation into a debate about our values and priorities. The ring on my finger, once a symbol of our future together, now felt like a reminder of our unresolved issues. One night, sitting alone in Grandpa's old study with the quiet world outside, I let myself think deeply about what was happening. Grandpa's words came back to me, always protect your own, Rachel, no matter how hard the choices may seem. As I looked at his portrait, I knew what I had to do. The next evening, Mark came home late from work, looking tired but hopeful. I asked him to sit down in the living room, where we had talked about our dreams and plans. Mark, we need to talk seriously, I began, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were shaking a bit. He nodded, understanding. I know we've been having issues lately, Mark said. I've been thinking a lot about what you said about the trust and everything. I appreciate that. I've been thinking too, I said, needing to speak before I lost my courage. This conflict is really affecting us, and I can't ignore that. Taking a deep breath, I continued, we both have different views on what our family should be, especially about money and our children. I can't let go of my responsibilities to Sophie, and I shouldn't have to apologize for that. But Rachel, isn't there a way we can work this out? Maybe a compromise? Mark asked, leaning forward, looking for hope in my eyes. I don't think so, Mark. It's not just about the money, it's about how we see our roles as parents and partners. I can't be in a relationship where I have to justify my daughter's future, I said, feeling the weight of my decision with every word. There was a long, painful silence as Mark processed what I was saying. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. What are you saying, Rachel? I'm saying that maybe we shouldn't get married, I said, feeling a bitter taste as the words left my mouth. Mark stared at me, shocked, then slowly nodded. If that's what you think is best. His voice wasn't agreeing, but rather defeated. I think it's best for both of us and the kids too, I added, feeling a mix of relief and deep sadness. I reached into my pocket and took out the engagement ring and held it out to Mark. I'm sorry, I said. He took the ring, held it for a moment, then stood up. I guess I should go, he said quietly before heading to the door, glancing back once for a silent goodbye. The room felt heavy with silence as he left. After Mark left, the silence turned into a storm of gossip and opinions from friends and family. Some thought I was being harsh and agreed with Mark's view on fairness in a blended family. Others supported me, understanding that I needed to protect Sophie. I knew I had to explain my decision to those closest to us, so I hosted a small gathering at my house with friends and family. The room was filled with unasked questions. I know you've heard different sides of what happened between Mark and me, I started, my voice firm and steady. I want to make it clear that this wasn't an easy choice. It wasn't just about money, it was about our very different views on family responsibilities. Jen, a mutual friend, asked with concern, I thought you two were perfect together. Mark seemed so understanding. Are you sure there wasn't a way to work things out? I cared deeply for Mark, and in many ways, we were good together, I replied, but when it came to how we handle our roles as parents, we couldn't agree. Protecting Sophie's future was something I couldn't compromise on, not even for Mark. Jen asked, but isn't marriage about compromise? What about his kids? Yes, marriage is about compromise, I said, but it's also about shared values. When those values are too different, finding a compromise can be too difficult and can upset the balance of the relationship. As I talked openly about the conflict I'd been feeling, some people agreed with me, while others were still unsure, but discussing it helped clear the air. Even though not everyone agreed with my decision, they began to understand where I was coming from. The next few weeks were a quiet time for Sophie and me as we adjusted to our new life. I focused on my work and planning for Sophie's future, attending school meetings, and finding educational opportunities that her trust fund could support. One afternoon, while Sophie played in the yard, I watched her from the window. Her laughter made me feel better and confirmed that I had made the right choice. A few weeks after our breakup, Mark and I had one last talk at a local cafe. It was a neutral place, away from our past. Rachel, I've had time to think, and I understand why you did what you did, Mark said quietly, not meeting my eyes. I wish things could have been different, Mark, I really do, I replied, feeling both comforted and pained by his presence. Yeah, me too, but maybe this is for the best for all of us, Mark said, looking at me. In the months after our breakup, life became calmer. I focused on Sophie, her laughter and curious nature reminding me why I made the decisions I did. We spent our days exploring new books, doing educational activities, and talking about big dreams. I also started volunteering with financial education programs, sharing our story to help other single parents. During one session, a single mother told me, "Your story gives me hope that I'm making the right choices for my kids, even when it's hard." Her words made me feel even more committed to our new path. Our story didn't end with a fairy tale wedding, but it gave us a deeper understanding of the challenges in blended families. The choices we made were tough, but they were necessary, shaping a legacy of strength and wisdom for Sophie. Now, I'd like to hear from you. How would you handle a situation where family values and financial decisions clash, especially when there are children from previous relationships involved? Do you think Rachel made the right choice by prioritizing her daughter's future over blended family unity? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more discussions like this. Your support helps us keep these conversations going.
For her beauty, youth and wealth, Michelle was disliked by her friends and acquaintances. The girl looked down on everyone, regardless of their status, and considered herself better than anyone in her circle. Not to mention those who lived in a crowded high-rise building. The rich beauty did not hesitate to show her contempt for those who depended on her. At the same time, no one dared say a word against her, as her father was a big shot. Despite her stubborn character, Michelle had warm relationships with her parents. But sometimes, even her mother and father did not understand how they managed to raise such a naughty girl. It was sometimes very difficult to get along with Michelle. If she decided on something, she would not calm down until she achieved her goals. And she didn't care if her desires could cause discomfort to someone. She did not have any true friends. She considered all the girls jealous, waiting to harm her. But by some miracle, she managed to maintain a relationship with Anita, the daughter of wealthy parents, whom she met in London while studying. Abroad, the girls tried to stick together and continued to be friends at home. To tell the truth, it was difficult to call their relationship a friendship. Rather, it was an eternal struggle between two beautiful and well-off girls who did not know what else to do to outdo each other. The girls competed in dresses, jewellery, parties and resorts, and always stayed approximately on an equal level. However, in the end, Michelle still won. She received a marriage proposal and was preparing for the wedding. Christopher was a groom to envy, a handsome man from a wealthy family, who had achieved a lot in his 27 years. Michelle sincerely loved him and could not wait for the wedding day. Anita, also surrounded by many admirers, had not yet found a worthy guy. She would also not refuse to marry a man like Christopher, but he was taken away from under her nose by the swift Michelle. It was difficult for Anita to get over her failure. Being upset, she bought herself a new sports car to comfort herself in this situation. The girl wanted to boast to her friend, and she suggested taking Michelle to the bridal salon to buy a dress. Michelle already had 2 luxurious wedding dresses made especially for her, but she wanted to have a spare dress just in case. This was a tiny detail that needed to be completed, because everything else had already been paid for, reserved and purchased. It was decided to buy a ready-made dress at a bridal house, which only a girl from the upper class could visit. The entrance was closed for mere mortals. In a cheerful mood, Michelle and Anita sat down in the new shiny car and went to the salon. As soon as Michelle, a tall brunette with big grey eyes and legs up to her ears, emerged from the fitting room in a magnificent white dress, Anita couldn't hold back. Her lips trembled, tears welled up in her eyes, and her hand reached for the glass of champagne that the salesperson politely offered her. Now it's clear why bridesmaids are offered champagne, Anita grumbled to herself, so that it won't be so bitter that they are not the ones getting married. The next dress was even better. Anita quickly finished her glass and reached for the next one. She didn't keep track on how much she drank, but she knew she couldn't endure this torture of someone else's happiness without the sparkling wine. One thing pleased her. Michelle didn't choose the dress in the end. Anita criticised her choice and said she wouldn't wear such a peasant dress from a 5-year-old collection. As they left the salon, the bride complained tearfully about the lack of normal shops in the city and didn't even notice that her friend was noticeably drunk. Anita knew she had had too much alcohol, but tried to keep her composure and without hesitation got behind the wheel. The car started moving. Michelle kept blabbering in the passenger seat, focused on the dress failure. Anita tried to cope with her inebriation, which prevented her from driving the car. Suddenly, the steering wheel went out of control, as if it had suddenly come alive and refused to obey. A sharp blow, Michelle's desperate scream. The car fell off the bridge and got into the water, carrying 2 friends with it. Anita couldn't remember how she got out of the car and landed on the shore. Her body trembled slightly, and her teeth chattered in an uneven rhythm. She was immediately noticed, offered help, and the ambulance and police were called. Coming to her senses, Anita was afraid that she would be tested for alcohol and found out that she was drunk behind the wheel. Several hours later, the car was lifted. However, Michelle was not there. Her parents were notified and they rushed to the scene as quickly as they could. The girl's mother didn't believe Anita when she said Michelle was driving. After all, Michelle was indifferent to cars and preferred to ride and take pictures in them rather than drive. Christopher also dropped everything and rushed to the scene. The view of the car from the bottom made his heart race. "Michelle, where are you? Michelle!" he shouted, and seeing the police, he asked, "My bride, she was in the car. What happened to her? Why are you people so calm and slow?" "Divers are looking for her," the police officer replied dryly. Judging by how serious the accident was and how deep the car sank, the girl didn't survive. "I'm sorry, but there's no hurry," the policeman replied mercilessly. He was indifferent to the grief of the wealthy groom, and even malice could be read in his eyes. Nearby, Michelle's father was hugging his weeping wife. "They're not doing anything. Nothing," the woman wailed. "Calm down, dear. I've already called the right people. The entire police force and rescue team will be here soon, and those indifferent people will be kicked off the job." But the punishment these people would face didn't matter to the woman. Finding her daughter was the most important thing. The search continued for several days, but the body was never found. The parents were inconsolable. Christopher grieved deeply. The policeman considered that the girl was dead. Only the father held out hope that his daughter was alive, resisting the idea of putting her photo in a black frame at home. "No," he said, "Michelle couldn't have just died like that." "Then where is she?" cried the distraught mother. A juniper growing by the river could give her the answer. It had seen a homeless guy jump into the water and retrieve the lifeless body. The guy performed CPR, and finally the girl started coughing. "She's alive!" the guy exclaimed, and the juniper bush joyfully waved its branches in response, although it might have just been the wind. The girl took a long time to come to her senses, but the guy was patient. He put his jacket on her to keep her warm, and when she was able to stand up with his help, he led her away. Michelle stumbled along, and the guy led her on. They met several people on the way. Some looked at the homeless guy and his muddy companion with disgust. Some laughed and winked. "What happened to you? Why were you in the water?" The guy tried to find out from Michelle, but she just shook her head and muttered something unintelligible. They walked for a long time. The girl was running out of energy. The air smelled bad, and she vaguely realized that she was in a city dump. They kept going, bypassing the stinking piles of garbage. Finally, they ended up in a shack made up of everything that came to hand. Old wooden doors, burlap, boards, and pieces of polyethylene. There was a fire burning nearby where sardines were being grilled. 3 stooped figures were nearby. "Here," the guy said, "meet Mermaid. I caught her in the river today, and I have to say, it's my luckiest catch." The figures straightened up and began to study their guest carefully. The girl also looked at them, absent-mindedly and fearfully. She couldn't tell if what was happening to her was real or a dream. One of the presenters was an old man, and the other two were younger, but they were all clearly people who had been thrown to the side of life. "So what's your mermaid's name?" the old man croaked. "I don't know, she's silent," the guy replied. The other two came closer and began to examine the girl. "She's pretty," one of them grinned unpleasantly. "She'll be our bride, won't she?" suggested the other, and both chuckled lustfully. "Hush, you tramp," protested the old man. "Can't you see the girl is in trouble? What was she doing in the river? Did she fall, or did she want to harm herself? We don't know. But let's not jump to conclusions. We need to warm her up and feed her," he said, turning to Michelle's rescuer. "Here," the guy said, leading her to the fire. "Get warm. Do you want to eat?" Michelle shook her head, feeling nauseous. "Do you want to drink?" Michelle shook her head again. Suddenly the girl burst into loud sobs. "Where am I? Who are you? It stinks here. Let me out of here." Don't worry, the guy tried to calm her down. "You're safe with us. You'll rest here and then go home." However, the girl suddenly shivered, started vomiting and passed out. The men decided to take her to the shack and figure out what to do with her. The guy who saved Michelle suddenly realized that he shouldn't have brought her here. He should have left her somewhere in a crowded place so that someone could find her and help her. Well, tomorrow is another day, and we'll decide what to do next. The next morning, Michelle woke up, weak, battered, and with a painfully throbbing headache. Seeing her saviour holding a cup of something hot and steaming in his hands, she instinctively recoiled from him. Shh, I'm Kevin. Do you remember me? Yesterday I pulled you out of the river. How do you feel?" He tried to speak as gently as possible. "Bad," Michelle muttered, looking around the shack where she had spent the night. A greasy mattress, dirty dishes, a pile of plastic bottles, some rags, and who knows what else. "I feel sick," Michelle moaned, crawling outside. She touched her face and head. Her face was swollen and her head was bandaged. But the worst thing was that the girl couldn't remember who she was, where she was from, or how she ended up here. She only understood one thing: something had happened to her, and she needed to get out of here urgently. Kevin tried to talk to Michelle, but to no avail. The girl didn't want to talk to him, and was afraid to admit that she didn't remember her name. Periodically, the guy had to fend off two guys from yesterday, who clearly wanted to get to know the girl better. Kevin never left Michelle's side, constantly watching over her. He only left when he saw that old Donovan was beckoning him with his finger, holding a newspaper in his hands. "That's the twist of fate. That's the twist," the old man said mysteriously, pointing to the front page. Under the headline announcing the disappearance of a millionaire's daughter was a photo of Michelle. Kevin was shocked. "Well done, Donovan. I'll take her to the police and I'll get a reward," he said happily. Wait, don't rush," the old man interrupted him. "Believe it or not, I know this. Michelle like the back of my hand. I didn't recognize her yesterday because she was all in the shadows and covered in dirt." "How do you know her, Donovan?" Kevin asked, surprised. "Do you really think that I've been hanging around in a dumpster all my life? No, before my son made me give my apartment to him and then kicked me out onto the street, I worked and earned well. I worked as a gardener for wealthy homes and had a good reputation. I took care of the most capricious and sickly plants, and I trimmed the bushes so skillfully. Oh, if you had seen my art. But then my son kicked me out, and life went downhill." "Oh, Donovan," Kevin said, "let's get to the point. What do you know about the girl?" "Oh yeah," Donovan remembered. "I worked in the house where this Thorne lived with her parents. I've never met a worse girl. She had a quarrelsome character, always finding fault with everything and everyone. She bullied all the servants, ordering them to redo things 100 times. And I got some of it too. Oh, I didn't believe in this boomerang before, but now I see it with my own eyes. It's all true. All that evil has come back to her, and we have to teach her a lesson for everyone she hurt. Listening to Donovan's story, Kevin was amazed. Oh, come on, what do you have in mind? He asked. The old man scratched his head. Nothing special. Let her live here with us on the dump, experience real life, and then we'll send our princess to her palace. Apparently she lost her memory when she fell into the river, so until she remembers, let her taste our hard life. Kevin agreed without hesitation. He hated spoiled rich kids so much. 2 years ago, a wealthy heir crashed into his car, and in that accident, Kevin's pregnant wife died. The grief-stricken young man gave away all his money, even sold all of his property, just to hire good lawyers and put the spoiled rich son behind bars. However, the rich guy had more money and good connections, and Kevin couldn't prove any. Feeling guilty towards his deceased wife and son, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol and ended up in the city dump. Meanwhile, the rich guy continued to drive around in his brand new car and felt like the owner of the city. That's why Kevin quickly agreed to teach the princess a lesson. Do you really not remember anything? He asked Michelle. Nothing, she grunted. Don't you even remember that I'm your husband? Hearing these words, Michelle raised her head, and 2 of Kevin's friends burst out laughing. Husband? The girl was surprised. Yes, that's right. My name is Kevin, and you're Michelle. My little Michelle, remember? Hearing her name, the girl flinched. Yes, you're right. I'm definitely Michelle. I know everything. Kevin laughed. Yesterday you were gathering beer bottles and cans on the beach and drinking the leftovers. No wonder you suddenly lost your balance, stumbled and fell into the water. Splash! I barely managed to pull you out. I was gathering bottles. Michelle couldn't believe her ears. Yes, and you call this a drunken hunt? There's always something tasty left on the bottom for you. Don't worry, my dear, you'll sober up soon, and we'll go gathering bottles again. These words made Michelle feel sick. She grabbed her head and stomach, sat down on the ground, and tucked her knees under her chin. This is a dream, a real dream, she repeated. However, the pungent smell around her hinted that everything was actually happening. At first, Michelle resisted everything that was happening to her. She cried and whined, but soon realized that if she didn't work, she wouldn't eat. After a couple of hungry days, she was ready to collect metal, tin cans, or search for food in terrible places. Over time, Michelle got used to this life and sincerely believed that Kevin was her husband. It should be noted that Kevin didn't live in a shack. This was his office. With the money left over from selling his apartment, he bought a dilapidated house and was constantly fixing it up. The house was in such bad shape that it would have been easier to build a new one, but Michelle was happy with it after living in a shack. She tried to bring order to the house, but everything slipped out of her hands. The girl was inexperienced as a housewife since, in her previous life, she had never held a broom, a rag, or even a paintbrush. After starting to live with Michelle, Kevin completely stopped drinking and even began to think about returning to his normal job. A damp autumn came. Rain poured like a bucket, and the shack no longer saved. The younger tramps went to the village and found some work with housing, but there was nowhere for Donovan to go. He settled in the shack on an old mattress and slept hugging a shaggy puppy named Alf, whom Donovan found in the garbage dump. Someone had thrown away the weak and sick puppy, and Donovan took him in. Now the black puppy, with a reddish tan, thanked his saviour by keeping him warm on cold evenings and frosty mornings. Learning how difficult it was for Donovan, Michelle protested. Kevin, aren't you ashamed? Donovan is all alone and we're living here under a roof. You have to take him in with us right away. Kevin agreed and brought the elderly man and his puppy into the house. "Here, Donovan, I've prepared a bed for you. I hope you'll be comfortable," the girl fussed. "We need to restore your documents so that you can receive your pension. You're entitled to it. We won't take anything from you, but you need warm clothes because the cold is coming soon." Donovan was so surprised that his mouth dropped open. He never expected such changes. When they were alone, he said to Kevin, "Listen, Kevin, you've gone too far. It's been a long time since you should have returned the girl to her family. You've trained her enough." "Wait, Donovan," Kevin was surprised. "Did you come up with the idea of re-educating Michelle? But I thought only a couple of weeks. And what are you doing?" "I won't give her up," Kevin said firmly. "She's my wife. I really like her."
"Well, look, Kevin, they'll put you in jail for that," Donovan warned him. And a little later, Kevin's plan almost failed. He went to the city on business and, at his own risk, took Michelle with him. The girl felt uncomfortable among the well-dressed people, most of whom looked down on her. One girl in particular stared at Michelle in disbelief and then rushed to her car. Yes, it was Anita who recognized Michelle. In the car, she grabbed her phone to tell Michelle's parents that she had seen their daughter, but then decided, to hell with it. Let her figure it out herself. Hitting the gas, Anita sped home, frightened and at the same time pleased with her action. Michelle quickly forgot about the strange rich girl. Gradually, her life improved. Kevin took any job he could get. Donovan restored his documents he had lost at the very beginning of his life on the street. Now he received a pension and gave part of the money to the young couple. They gradually repaired the house, which confidently turned from an ugly wreck into a pretty and cosy home, albeit modest. A year passed. Michelle made some friends, simple but very nice girls. She planted a garden on the plot with Donovan's help. The adult and large Alf proudly ran around the house, feeling responsible for guarding the house and owners. But most importantly, Michelle sincerely loved Kevin, whom she considered her husband. Over time, the guy himself began to believe in the whole story he had made up. Kevin worked in a warehouse and had progressed from a simple dispatcher to a manager. He did not plan to stop there, as this position was much lower than the one he held before. But he made useful connections, and he got Michelle a job in a good cleaning company. The girl was already skilled, but in the company she underwent additional training and proved herself to be the best, earning the trust of the best houses. Cleaning was done comprehensively, and sometimes Michelle was left alone with her task, but sometimes her partner helped her. The pay was good, but they hurried Michelle to restore her documents. The woman wanted to go to the police, but Kevin tried to dissuade her with different excuses. For now, they let her work without documents, and she took advantage of it. One day, Michelle was taken to a house where there was going to be a celebration.
Seeing the house, Michelle felt something strange inside, like déjà vu. Michelle wiped surfaces, treated them with polish, but she felt that something was wrong with her. Her partner was angry with her slowness, constantly pushing her, but Michelle couldn't do anything about it. Finally, the girl went down to the hall and started cleaning up there. And suddenly, she was struck like lightning. Her photograph was in a black frame on the fireplace shelf. Only Michelle looked entirely different. Even her gaze was different. The girl's eyes darkened, and then she saw bright flashes of light and "Yes, it's me!" Unable to bear the shock, Michelle screamed. Her partner ran to her. Also, Michelle's mother came down hearing the scream. What's going on?" she asked irritably, and then she froze. "Michelle, this is a dream. I don't believe it." The woman waved her hands, but soon came to her senses and realized that it was not a dream. She immediately called her husband, and he also came. Running into the room, he stopped and stood rooted to the spot. Then he ran to his daughter and hugged her. "Daughter, Michelle, how long we searched for you, my dear. We paid everyone we could to dig up the whole city, but we couldn't find you." Like her parents, Michelle couldn't come to her senses. Her memories were fragmentary, but she remembered who she was and recognized her parents. And she also realized that her husband, whom she loved very much, was deceiving her. She no longer wanted to talk to him, and the guy understood everything. "The main thing is not to start drinking," Donovan reassured him. "No," Kevin replied. "I won't fall into this abyss for the second time. The main thing is not to end up in jail now. It is too late to repent." The old man. "Now you need to worry about staying alive at all. These are serious people. They will avenge their daughter." The prospect scared Kevin, but he understood that he was at fault himself. Meanwhile, Christopher came to the hospital to see Michelle, who was just undergoing a routine examination after 2 years of wandering. He hugged the girl for a long time and said many warm words. However, he then reported that, unfortunately, he was getting married in a few days. But Michelle was not upset. On the contrary, she was happy for Christopher. As for Anita, she was afraid to come, and Michelle knew why. She remembered seeing her by the car then, and realized that she would never forgive her for this cowardice. Michelle initially didn't want to talk to Kevin, but then realized that she missed him. She explained to her father that Kevin was not a kidnapper, that he saved her, and that she considers him her husband. The girl was sincerely grateful to fate for such an experience that made her a completely different person. Now she will have an entirely different life. 1 month had passed and the festive table was set in the garden. Alf was bustling around with a wide smile, trying to get everyone to taste something delicious. Donovan was distracted from the feast and was studying a plant in the flower bed. He had been taken on as a gardener and given a house on the property, eagerly awaiting the start of his duties. Michelle was whispering something sweet into Kevin's ear, and he smiled. The girl invited her new friends over, who admired her wealthy home. They were having a good time at the table. Michelle knew how to have fun in a simple and heartfelt way, without vulgarity or bad taste. They were celebrating their true wedding to Kevin. Although the parents wanted to organize a grand celebration, Michelle said she didn't need all that fuss. Suddenly, she felt sick at the table and ran to the bathroom. One of her friends, worried about her condition, followed her and found that Michelle was nauseous. The friend suggested a pregnancy test, saying, "Here, take it. We're planning a baby, so I have these tests lying around the house, even in bags." Michelle took the test with doubt, but when she saw 2 stripes 5 minutes later, her surprise and happiness knew no bounds. She went out to the garden and handed the test to Kevin. The girl knew that his pregnant wife had died many years ago, so she wasn't surprised to see tears in her husband's eyes. He hugged her tightly, and all the guests applauded. The happy Donovan shouted, "Happiness to the newlyweds!" Juliana was surrounded by the smell of household chemicals, soapy foam, and her partner's usual singing. She worked together with Leslie as a dishwasher at the famous restaurant Bohemia, which was considered the favourite place for celebrating elite banquets. When she first found herself inside the richly decorated hall, she was afraid they would not even listen to her and accept her into the chic place. But the team turned out to be friendly and rejoiced at every new, worthy employee. Juliana quickly learned everything she needed to know, but was advised not to take long breaks for lunch or get stuck on the phone. "Look at how your little ones run around," Leslie nodded at 5-year-old girl, who tried to do all the little errands she was given while her mother worked. You have a brisk little girl growing up, and you complained that she got a heavy cold. Oh, don't talk about it. She's well now. Juliana smiled, looking at her beloved daughter. How tired I am of this cold. It's all because of the dilapidated house we live in. The floor creaks, the roof leaks, there are gaps in the windows. I'm so tired, you can't imagine. Juliana did not notice how another hour of work had passed. Although the shifts were non-standard and unbearably heavy, she was satisfied with steady work and decent pay. Mr. Hurtado, the owner of the famous restaurant, turned out to be a wonderful person. Despite being a powerful businessman, he treated his subordinates politely and empathetically. He allowed Juliana to take Hope with her because there was no one to look after her after kindergarten. Juliana raised her daughter alone, so she relied only on herself. The problems of a single mother were endless. She tried her best, but sometimes her nerves gave in. Juliana wanted to rent another place, but the money was flying away somewhere unknown. The salary was literally disappearing before her eyes, no matter how many shifts she worked per month. That evening, Bohemia hosted 350 people for a celebration of a powerful businessman's only daughter's wedding. He spared no expense in organizing the celebration and decorating the hall. In the morning, Mr. Hurtado gathered the staff. The bride's family promised every employee a decent bonus if everything went according to the highest standard. We must cope. Do you hear me? Don't let me down. And good luck to all of us. Mr. Hurtado is not just a boss, he's gold, said Juliana with a smile. Where would I leave Hope if he didn't allow me to take her with me? She doesn't bother anyone. Look how hard she tries to please everyone. Good for her, Leslie laughed, rinsing another batch of dirty plates. Though you're single, but you're lucky with your daughter. Everything will work out. Don't be sad, you're only 29. You'll find someone who will love you. Trust me, it's easier with a man in daily life. I got married for the 3rd time last winter, so you'll definitely find your man. Juliana didn't like these words of conversations. After her husband's death 3 years ago, she didn't dare to think about another man. She was devoted to her love and didn't rush to open her heart to someone else. Juliana hadn't recovered from the tragedy yet, so she put all her efforts into raising Hope. Don't talk to me about others, please. She turned to a surprised Leslie. I live for Hope. She's my light in the window. I stand up every day just for her. No, affairs are not for me. Since fate has decreed it, I'll carry my cross. You're strange, Leslie smiled in response. Why suffer alone? For what? No one will appreciate your sacrifices, believe me. Better look at someone. You won't regret it. Oh, instead of a new wedding, I'd better think about how to make ends meet. It's not easy to raise a child alone. I didn't even imagine what I would have to face. Who would have thought that my Steve would disappear without a trace? The conversation about her deceased husband plunged Juliana into despair. She fell silent and focused on the plates in her hands. But Steve's smiling face appeared before her eyes again when he had just started courting her. He always knew how to please her. Mummy, Mum! Hope approached Juliana with a happy smile and a beautiful and insanely expensive bouquet of exotic, delicate flowers, whose name no one in the kitchen workers knew. Look what I brought you! It's beautiful, isn't it? Juliana stared at the bouquet in shock. Her happy child had just led her to dismissal. Sweetie, hurry! Put this back where it belongs. We could not get in trouble for this. No, Mum. Nobody needs it. It was just lying there on the table. I watched it for a long time. Leslie looked at her colleague and knelt in front of the little girl. Sweetie, take the bouquet back quickly, so no one sees you.
Your mum could get fired from her job."
"But I didn't mean to."
Hope immediately became upset, and her big, naive eyes filled with tears.
"Mum, they won't fire you. I promise. I'll take it back right now."
"Hurry up, honey. The bride must throw the bouquet to her friends. No wedding is complete without it. If they notice you took it, it will be terrible." Juliana patted her daughter's back to calm her down and nudged her toward the hall. Juliana shouldn't be seen there, but a quick child running among the guests wouldn't attract much attention. 5 minutes before that conversation, the groom, named George, noticed how the little girl grabbed the bouquet and rushed off somewhere. Overcoming the crowd of guests who constantly stopped him to congratulate him personally, he burst into the utility room. He saw the little girl saying something to the dishwasher and quickly went to them. As soon as Juliana noticed the groom, whom she hadn't been able to see carefully until now, she clutched her heart. She barely missed knocking over the stack of freshly washed dishes, which could have shattered into pieces. "Steve?" she said quietly, not believing her own eyes, and her face turned pale. "Juliana, what's wrong?" Leslie touched her on the shoulder. "Did you see a ghost or something?" "The ghost of my late husband. This is Steve." The incident with the bouquet was immediately forgotten. Julia couldn't think of anything else but her husband standing in front of her. There couldn't be a mistake, because she would have recognized him after 4 years. Steve was standing in front of her, without a doubt. He may have gained a little weight, changed his hairstyle to the latest fashion, but her eyes didn't deceive her. "Explain why this child is wandering around the hall during my wedding," George thundered loudly. "And why is she stealing other people's things? It's outrageous. What kind of place is this? I was told it was the best in town." George's angry tone didn't scare Juliana. She reached out to him and touched his cheek, as if afraid the delusion would fade away as soon as she felt his skin under her fingers. "Why are you shouting like that, my love? I knew you weren't dead. You couldn't leave us. You don't remember us at all?" George immediately stepped back and stared at her, bewildered. He had no idea who this strange woman was, or why she was crying. "Lady, what are you talking about? I'm not your husband. I'm the groom, actually. I had a wedding today that this girl almost ruined." "Steve, it's you, I know, I see it," Juliana persisted, speaking as if in a dream. "Don't you recognize me? And Hope, she's your daughter. Don't pretend, it's too cruel. Look me in the eyes. I'm your wife, Juliana." George sighed, completely confused by what was happening. Juliana began to scare him for real. He wanted to quickly return to the hall, to the bride, and forget everything he had seen in the kitchen. "I'm sorry that something sad happened to you, but I don't remember either you or your daughter. My name is George. I grew up in an orphanage. We can't have anything in common, let alone children." "Juliana, seriously, calm down." Leslie tried to reason with her colleague, but to no avail. "Don't ruin the wedding. Hope, darling, give the bouquet to the groom and apologize." "I'm sorry. I won't do it again," the girl whispered, looking at the stern man. She hoped that Leslie's words wouldn't come true and that her mum wouldn't get fired. Tears rolled down Juliana's cheeks again. She didn't believe it was a mistake. Her daughter had the right to know her father. She deserved to live in a full family. Why was Steve behaving like a stranger? Meanwhile, Mr. Hurtado entered the kitchen and noticed a guest. Usually he didn't allow them to go into the utility room, but recognizing the groom, he softened and put on a duty smile. "What upset our dear groom here? Can I help you?" "He's not George," Juliana exclaimed, unable to hold back. "He's Steve Hamilton, my husband." "Why don't you admit it? Why are you silent like a lifeless statue?
My heart is breaking because of your silence." "Juliana, stop this circus immediately," Mr. Hurtado shouted at her, grabbing her by the shoulders. "Calm down, otherwise I'll kick you out of here forever. Do you hear me?" The owner of Bohemia's threats had no effect. There was nothing more important for Juliana right now than to get an explanation from her missing husband. "This is my husband who disappeared 4 years ago. He was declared dead. Mr. Hurtado, I mourned for him all this year," the crying woman explained to her boss, and then she turned to the groom. "Doesn't it hurt you to see us? How could you just disappear without explaining? You're a coward. That's who you are," Juliana yelled, not ashamed of anyone around. Mr. Hurtado stopped holding her. "Is what she's saying true?" he asked the groom. George looked offended. "And you too? What a show! Do I have to show my passport to prove my name? That's it. I'm leaving. My guests and bride are waiting for me, while I have to endure this crazy woman's attacks. Fire her. She'll ruin your business." Watching George's retreating figure, Juliana, for the first time, considered the thought that he might not be Steve. Maybe George was his twin. "Juliana, go wash up and get to work." Mr. Hurtado patted her on the shoulder, calming her down. "I don't know what personal drama you have, but it's not the place for it at the moment. You've stopped the entire work. Stay after the banquet. We need to talk." A couple of hours later, Hope was sitting by Mr. Hurtado's office door. Through the glass door, she could see him gesturing and moving his lips frequently, and her mother, meanwhile, stood with her head down. She rarely said anything, admitting her guilt. "Is it because of the bouquet?" the girl asked Leslie. She stayed to watch over the girl while her mother was at the boss's office. "No, dear, it's much more complicated," she comforted the child. "These are adult matters. You wouldn't understand, but your mum will be punished for the bouquet as well. Remember, you should never take someone else's things, even if they're beautiful. Even if you really want to, you should never do it." "I understand," Hope exclaimed, promising herself not to do it again. She was anxious about her mother. "Juliana, don't let me down like that again. Can I rely on you?" Mr. Hurtado asked one last time, packing his things into a leather briefcase. "I'm loyal enough to my employees, but you still have to know your boundaries." "It won't happen again. Thank you for your understanding. Goodbye, Mr. Hurtado." Julia sighed heavily, finding herself behind the door. She desperately wanted to be at home, take a bath, and relax her buzzing legs from tension. "Mummy, I'm sorry that I put you in trouble," the upset daughter apologized. "It was a tough day today. You're remorseful. That's enough punishment for you. Let's go buy something delicious instead. What do you want?" "Awesome. I want ice cream. Or cotton candy." Hope immediately perked up, skipping along. The 24-hour store in the residential area was small, but almost everything could be found in it. After wandering around for 15 minutes, Julia and Hope gathered the necessary groceries and put them on the counter. The tired salesman called out a sum to pay and stared at Juliana, clearly unhappy with their late arrival. "Wait a minute," Juliana said as she put her hand in her pocket where she had recently placed her earnings for the shift, and exclaimed loudly, "Oh God, where are they?" Upon looking into her pocket, she noticed a big hole that had gone unnoticed due to her daily work and household chores. "Why is this happening to me? Did I really lose everything?" She began to rummage through another pocket on her jacket, but there was no money to be found. She found only a few dollars with small change. The salesman looked at her and raised an eyebrow, waiting for the rest of the sum. "Listen," he began rudely, "either pay or leave. Stop pretending that you lost your money.
And you brought a child with you. Shame on you. We know scams like you. We've dealt with them. Initially, Juliana didn't understand why he was treating her like a beggar, but then she became offended. Who do you think I am? Did I ask you to give me the products for free? Why are you so rude? Because you're annoying with your antics. Get a job and stop bothering normal people. I'll say it again. Either pay or leave. I shop here almost every day. Your shift worker knows me. Juliana decided to resist. Her nerves were on edge that day, so she didn't stay silent. I'll take only an ice cream. I don't have more. Well, you're twisting it. Okay, give me your small change, the cashier said mockingly. Please change your tone and do your job properly, tiredly said Juliana. But the salesman kept speaking rudely and mockingly. Don't tell me what to do, swindler. Mummy, why are you arguing again? Hope started crying. She had already seen too many quarrels involving her mother. Let's go home, quickly, please. See what you've done with your rudeness. Juliana got angry with the man. No compassion at all. What a rude man. She wiped her daughter's cheeks with her palm and kissed her on the nose. Don't cry, baby. Here is your ice cream. We're almost home. How did they even hire you here? Someone behind Juliana said. A tall, strong man, around 35 years old, appeared out of nowhere, threateningly looking at the confused salesman. What, not enough thrills? You found yourself a victim? A woman and a child. What a brave man. Can you deal with equals, or are you just a coward? The stranger leaned over the cashier, bending over the counter. The latter stepped back, realizing he was in trouble. People told him many times that he would pay for his long tongue one day, and it was still unexpected. No, I didn't mean to mock her. We have all sorts of people coming here. He immediately started to apologize himself. Even his voice changed, becoming quiet and high-pitched. Take it, the stranger said to Juliana and pointed to the purchases Juliana couldn't buy. I'm paying. Brad, that was the stranger's name, left the store with Hope and Juliana when the careless employee apologized to them. Thank you so much, Juliana smiled at her rescuer. I'm so exhausted today that I don't have the energy to swear. And then this guy started mocking me. Sir, thank you so much, Hope repeated after her mother, happy to see her smile again. Brad also smiled and offered to walk them home. Juliana usually only interacted with men for work and had not noticed any interest in her for a long time. Now, in the middle of the night, after experiencing a vulnerable situation, she was glad to meet someone strong and caring. You have a beautiful daughter, Brad noted, watching as Hope jumped up and down with every step. I always wanted a kid too, but it didn't work out. Juliana noticed the man's face darken. I'm a widower. My wife and I were trying to have a baby, and we were thinking of adopting since it wasn't working out, and then during a routine checkup, we found out she had a tumour. I'm sorry for your loss, Brad. That's a big loss. I can understand. My husband, Juliana sighed, preparing to open up to a stranger despite what happened at Bohemia. I also lost my husband 3 years ago, so I'm coping on my own. Surprisingly, Juliana felt no worry but lightness. She rarely talked to anyone about Steve, and every time it ended in tears, so she preferred to remain silent. But Brad understood her, and he didn't need any extra words. He himself had experienced all the pain she had. Yes, it's always hard to talk about it out loud, the man admitted with a bitter smile. My friends advised me to talk more about the tragedy, to pour out my emotions, but that's nonsense. Yes, they don't understand, said Juliana sharply, and stopped at the entrance. Here we are.
Do you want me to feed you dinner? We have meatballs.
No, thank you. Rest, I won't bother you. Let's exchange phone numbers, just in case you need to calm down a salesman again. Juliana agreed. She had learned a little about him, only about the loss of his wife, but nevertheless she felt that she could trust this man. After having dinner with her daughter, Juliana put Hope to bed and stayed in the kitchen to clean up. Her thoughts involuntarily turned to the past. Juliana couldn't call her rural childhood happy. She didn't remember her early years well, but as she got older, her parents imposed more responsibilities on her. She was the oldest of 3 children, so there was always enough responsibility. 14-year-old Juliana used to wake her brother and sister up for school, making breakfast for them. "Get up, don't be lazy. I've already taken care of all the chores, and you're all lying around." Despite Juliana's huge help, her parents for some reason did not like her. They did not give her even a drop of the affection that they gave to the younger children. Sometimes Juliana went to her mother, hoping to get answers to troubling questions. "Mum," she asked hesitantly, afraid of being rude, "am I doing something wrong? I'm an obedient daughter. I study well, but you hug me so rarely." "Don't fill your head with nonsense. Do your father and I treat you badly? What do you lack?" the woman replied. "You know we live modestly. There are 3 of you. We do everything possible to get everyone on their feet. No time for tenderness." But Juliana didn't believe that answer. She felt like a stranger in her own home. "Mum, Dad, I want to talk to you about my future," said Juliana to her parents at the end of her senior year. "I don't want to burden you. I'm going to live in the city. If I can, I'll go to college. If not, I'll find a job." "You're so smart," smiled her father. "You understand that we still have younger ones to raise. We'll help you with money in the beginning, but then you're on your own." To Juliana's disappointment, her rural education wasn't enough to enroll into college. She had to find a job quickly to avoid returning home in shame. Her parents rejoiced at her grown-up decision. It was impossible to let them down. Many shops were ready to hire the hard-working girl, even without experience. She got along easily with people and had knowledge of gardening, so she decided to try herself as a salesperson at the flower shop. "Don't be afraid," Melanie, her new colleague, encouraged her. "I'll teach you everything. Our boss is strict, but she rarely shows up." "I'll do my best not to disappoint you," Juliana modestly smiled. Despite her simple appearance, Juliana was far from being a foolish country girl. She quickly caught on and settled into the shop, becoming popular with regular customers. Often, wealthy men would spoil Juliana with small gifts, such as sweets or inexpensive trinkets. But she refused them, afraid of those who looked down upon her, and her boss did not encourage flirting with clients. One day, a handsome young man entered the flower shop and asked Juliana, "Miss, can you tell me how to win a beauty's heart?" Juliana was taken aback, but the handsome stranger's intense gaze made her answer honestly. "With care. You can't replace sincere concern and a desire to protect your beloved with anything." The man was amused by her answer. He took off his jacket and draped it over Juliana's shoulders. Because of the low temperature, which was maintained in the flower pavilion, she often caught a cold. "Don't take it off," the stranger said without a hint of a smile. "Let it always keep you warm." Thus, she met Steve. Because of his own business, he could afford to woo beautifully, quickly turning a girl's head. "Everything is moving so quickly, I can't keep up with it," Juliana exclaimed, sitting in a boat during a romantic walk. They were surrounded only by quiet nature and the chirping of insects. Steve moved closer and offered her a snack. "If you agree to be with me," he promised, "I'll always take care of you.
You won't regret it if you give me a chance." For the first time, Juliana experienced such feelings. She constantly felt uplifted and wanted to be with her beloved every minute. Steve was attentive and always listened to her wishes. After experiencing a deprived childhood, Juliana was surrounded by the boundless love and care that she had so longed for. She gave herself over to these crazy feelings without hesitation. The couple got married just 5 months later. Juliana felt like the heroine of a romantic movie with a happy ending. She believed that ahead of her was a whole life hand in hand with Steve, whom she loved so much. "You have such a beautiful surname. Can I take it?" asked Steve before the wedding. Juliana was surprised by his question. "Why, usually it's the opposite," she said, kissing him on the nose. "I know, but I'm not a supporter of prejudices. Your surname sounds great. Let's give our children a sonorous name. What do you think?" "You're right. I didn't even think about it. Let it be so." Juliana readily agreed. At first, Juliana was glad about her husband's wealth and spent his money since he earned well. However, Steve never discussed his business with her. "Darling, are you some kind of spy? Why don't you ever talk about your business with me? And why don't your friends or colleagues come to us?" "Why should my dear wife know about it? They're our men's business, you understand? Just trust me, live for your pleasure." Steve evaded the questions and didn't tell her anything. Several attempts to talk to her husband were unsuccessful. Juliana realized that she shouldn't know about Steve's activities. What if he is a secret agent? What if his duty obliges him to keep information even from his closest relatives? Respecting her husband and trusting him totally, Juliana calmed down and stopped asking him questions. "Juliana, you're just glowing." Former colleague Melanie chattered. "You've blossomed after getting married. Expensive clothes, jewellery, even holding yourself differently." "Thank you, my dear," Juliana answered shyly. "I've noticed it myself, too. Money works wonders. Steve does everything, so that I don't need anything. But I'll tell you the secret of my radiance. We're expecting a baby." The young woman admitted with a happy smile. "Oh, how wonderful! Congratulations! Let the baby develop healthily, without any trouble," Melanie said, carefully hugging Juliana and putting her hand on her unnoticed little belly. Steve surrounded his wife with care, anticipating all her desires. Although he often stayed at work and could leave on a business trip for several days, but he always stayed in touch. As for her parents, Juliana rarely communicated with them. They came to the wedding, but didn't even stay for the night. Steve rented them a good room in a hotel. However, the spouses returned to their younger children, justifying to themselves that they had household chores that couldn't be left unattended. After the birth of little Hope, Steve seemed to have changed. Juliana noticed some strangeness in him that alarmed her. "Honey, what's going on?" She couldn't stand it when her husband once again jumped out of the room, answering the phone. "Everything's fine," he always answered, but the tone and secrecy didn't suit Juliana. Steve started checking the windows and the front door before bed and was often lost in thought. One day he got worried when their neighbours knocked on their door. On the street he started looking around. "What's going on?" Juliana pestered him, beginning to worry about her and Hope's safety. "Don't worry, I just became like this after the birth of our daughter. I'm a father, your protector. I should always be on alert to protect you from any surprise." But Juliana noticed that her husband was irritated by her persistence. "Why do you keep asking? Don't you have enough problems? Take care of the child instead. You should improve as a mother." Steve's words hurt Juliana. She didn't expect him to be so harsh and unfair. She always tried to keep their home in order, even when she didn't sleep all night because of their daughter's colic. Juliana stopped bothering her husband, but she kept watching him. She felt in her heart that Steve was scared, but he didn't want to share it with her. As a good wife, she should have been his support and confidant, but he didn't see it that way. He preferred to solve everything himself. At first, she liked that about him. But if they were in danger, she had the right to know and prepare for any situation. Steve, however, stubbornly remained silent, assuring her that there was nothing to worry about. Then, one day, he disappeared forever. The frightened Juliana's statement was only accepted by persistent police officers 3 days later. "Ma'am, I understand that you're worried." The officer comforted her. "But there are rules. We can't drop everything to search for your husband just because he didn't come home. Maybe he decided to take an unplanned vacation. He's tired of family life. Your little daughter is probably annoying him. I don't need your assumptions. I need action. What if my husband is already lying somewhere injured? What if he needs help? We're wasting precious time. If something has happened to him and you haven't acted, please calm down. The search will not begin until it is appropriate. Go home and rest. Put the little one to bed. Your husband will be found. This happens often. Mistresses and such." But Juliana was right. Something bad had happened to Steve. As soon as the police started searching, they found his car in a strip of forest on the second day. It was in terrible condition, abandoned, dented, windows broken, headlights shattered. "Oh my God!" Juliana screamed when she was told about the blood in the car. "Is it Steve's blood? Have you found out what happened to him? Why would anyone do this? They're not human. They're beasts." "The examination is still pending. The results will be available in 4 days. For now, I can only advise you to try not to think of the worst. Do you have any relatives in the city? Ask them to come and stay with you," advised the officer, who was now convinced that Steve's life was in danger. "If your husband is wealthy, then he may have been kidnapped. Sooner or later, they will contact you and demand a ransom. Keep your phone with you. If there is any news, contact us immediately." From that moment on, Juliana was often called in for questioning. In case of a spouse's death or disappearance, their other half was the first to be suspected. However, no motive or evidence was found against Juliana, so they dismissed this theory, leaving the woman to grieve her loss. And now, 5 years after those sad events, Juliana was excited by meeting George at Bohemia. She could hardly sleep until morning. Memories of their acquaintance and her closeness with Steve deprived her of sleep. The next day, Juliana headed to work again, taking her daughter with her. That day, they were once again holding a grand banquet, and she was happy that work would help her distract herself from sad thoughts. Concentration on work always helped. Walking from the bus stop to the gates of Bohemia, Juliana became alert, realizing that the inconspicuous car was slowly following them all the time. The woman was frightened to the core. She remembered the times when Steve looked back at every car like this, afraid that he would be caught off guard. The alarm grew, taking her back to those uneasy weeks. "Hope, my sunshine," Juliana sat down in front of her daughter. "Run inside and find Leslie. Tell her to watch over you." "And where are you going? Can I come with you?" Her daughter immediately perked up. "No, my dear, not today. I have urgent business, and it's not for children," Juliana said sternly, knowing how to influence her child. "Will you be back soon? I'll wait for you." "Of course. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Just sit in one place and don't get in the way of the adults. Remember what happened yesterday." "That's right. Wait for me calmly." Seeing Hope enter the restaurant, Juliana turned the corner and hid. She saw a tall man get out of the car. The hood hid his face, but the stranger headed towards the turn where the woman had just disappeared. Wanting to uncover the identity of her pursuer, Juliana quickly ran around the building to catch up with him from behind and not allow him to escape. Hearing her fast footsteps behind him, the man turned around. "Brad!" Juliana gasped, stopping in her tracks. "Why are you here? Why are you following me?" The woman immediately grew angry. The adrenaline pumping through her veins made her bolder and firmer. Her gaze showed that she wouldn't back down without answers to her pressing questions. Brad's face wasn't hostile. He seemed just as friendly and calm as he had during their nighttime meeting. She didn't feel any threats from him. "Hello, Juliana, don't be afraid. I'm not dangerous to you." "Then explain what's going on. Why are you following us? So, yesterday's meeting wasn't a coincidence, right? Answer, Brad. Or are you not Brad? Why do you need this?" Juliana noticed that she had caught the man off guard with her actions and was proud of herself. Now she had the advantage. He couldn't evade the truth. "And don't you dare lie to me. I'll notice it." "Well, you're a smart woman," he replied calmly. "I suggest we discuss everything in a more pleasant place, but you have your work shift ahead." "I want to hear everything now. We have 10 minutes. Juliana stood her ground, staring unwaveringly. "The thing is, I used to be a police officer. Now I work as a private detective. I have my own agency. It's just business. And I'm hunting for that same George, your husband's alleged twin." Surprise was easily readable on Juliana's face. "Why do you need him? Is he involved in something? Tell me, is he really not familiar with my Steve? If he knows where my husband is, why didn't he say so yesterday? I had such a tantrum, I could have lost my job, and he just kept silent. No sympathy at all. He definitely knew who I was, but behaved so coldly. I suspect there is no George or Steve. It's the same fraudster, a marriage swindler." "What?" the woman protested. "Why, Steve isn't like that. He loved me. We had a family. Would he start a real family? That's ridiculous. Steve adored Hope. He couldn't live without her. You don't know what you're talking about. He couldn't have become a criminal. He loved us and did everything for the good of the family. He couldn't have been such an excellent actor and then just disappeared from his own child's life." Brad looked sympathetically at the desperate woman. "I'm sorry to say this, but you have no idea what these scoundrels are capable of doing for their own benefit. They're dangerous. Calculating people are capable of great cruelty." Juliana leaned against the wall, dizzy from the sudden feeling. Over the years that she had been waiting for her husband's return, the woman had considered various versions of what had happened. She blamed Steve's business for everything. It always seemed suspicious. And now she's found out another terrible version. "Are you all right?" Brad took her shoulders and looked into her eyes. "Breathe calmly, Juliana. Breathe. That's it. Clever girl, don't panic. You're holding up well," he said with a light smile. "Your spouse is a real pro. He's fooled many women, including me, using different names and surnames, while at the same time cleaning out the bank accounts of his wealthy wives. He takes out loans in their names. That's how he lives. He always has money to charm his next victim." "But why did Steve need me? My parents are poor country workers. You've probably figured that out by now. Is there any profit from me? I'm not the daughter of a banker or a politician." "You don't know everything about yourself," replied Brad, deciding to reveal the whole truth. "I was hired by an influential person to keep an eye on you. You have no idea how protected you are." "Oh, really?" Juliana couldn't help but laugh irritably. "Dangerous and powerful dishwasher woman from a restaurant. Are you kidding me? Just tell me who sent you to me. I want to meet him." "No problem," the man immediately agreed. "But later. It's time for you to go now or you'll be late. I'll call you when I arrange the meeting." This conversation excited Juliana. She had many questions in her head that she wanted to ask right now, but she had to wait. And a couple of days later, Brad called. "It's time to visit my new employer. I'll drive you myself, but it will be a long drive," he said. Juliana felt nervous all the hours before the upcoming meeting. She didn't know what to expect or how to react. All her life, someone knew more about her than she did. Couldn't such a situation be frightening? "Are you nervous?" Brad asked quietly, skillfully driving the car through busy city streets. "Is it that obvious?" Juliana shuddered from his close attention. "I don't know how everything will end," she admitted, and the man gently touched her hand in a sign of support. "Believe me, everything will be much better than you imagine. This meeting will bring you peace. By the way, here we are." The car approached a large house, nestled among tall trees. The territory was surrounded by a high fence, which didn't allow anyone to peek inside. "Wow!" Hope exclaimed. "Is this a fairy tale house? Who lives here?" "You'll find out soon," Brad smiled, parked the car, and they all headed towards the house. The territory seemed overgrown with neglected vegetation. Flowers grew on their own, surrounded by weeds and ivy, as if they were wild. The paths to the benches and the old fountain were also overgrown long ago. Brad walked ahead. Juliana was sure he had been here more than once, so he knew his way around. "Please come in." He opened the heavy entrance door and let Hope and Juliana go first. The hallway seemed dark and mysterious. Brad led them into a cozy living room with old furniture. It smelled of expensive man perfume. And as soon as Juliana and her daughter entered the room, an elderly stranger stood up from his chair. "Finally!" exclaimed the owner, moving forward. "Hello, Juliana." "Hello, Hope." He ran his hand through the girl's hair, causing her to blush and press against her mother. "Please introduce yourself." Juliana immediately got down to business. "I'm concerned about the surveillance by Brad, and I want to know what's going on." "Sit down, dear, sit down." The elderly man pointed to the dark sofa with oriental ornaments. "My name is Peter Davis, and I am your father, Juliana." "This is ridiculous. I know my parents." "Those people just raised you at my request, my dear, but there is no blood relationship between you. So, what made you contact me now?" "When you were born, I was already firmly established. My business was growing, only my rise came at an uneasy time. Many of the companions I started with went over to the criminal side. I didn't want to dirty my hands and be afraid all my life. But those who were my faithful comrades turned into my bitterest enemies. I had a choice. Either I was with them, or I was going to jail on a case they fabricated. I tried to resist, and your mother paid the price for my ignorance." Mr. Davis stopped and was silent for a moment, remembering the past was difficult for him. "Your mother died in an arranged accident, but I knew who was behind it. I had huge material on all of them. After your mother's murder, I gave everything to the police, and it became a high-profile case. After that, I disappeared from the country because I knew their cronies would come after me for revenge. And the only revenge for them was my and your deaths. Believe me, my daughter, I didn't want to leave you at the mercy of fate. But I had no choice. I gave you to a poor family and hid you so that no one knew you were my little heiress. After these events, I hid outside the country for a long time. The constant fear of being found, the separation from you, seriously undermined my health. Money doesn't solve everything, although it's considered otherwise. My illness is incurable, and I wanted to die in my homeland among loved ones. And you, my daughter, and Hope, are the only relatives I have. In addition, all my enemies are already dead. Some died in prison, some died in a struggle for power and money. And now I am so happy to see my granddaughter with my own eyes. I never forgot about you. I helped as much as I could. But I had to do it very secretly. If I had been caught, I and you wouldn't have been left alive. Juliana was overwhelmed with conflicting emotions. On the one hand, she was glad to have found her biological father, who happened to take care of her from the side. She always felt neglected by her mother and father, and now she found out why. On the other hand, she was angry that such an influential person as her father allowed her to get involved with the fraudster Steve. So, I'm your only heir, me and Hope, and you're not afraid of my selfish plans after this confession? Mr. Davis laughed good-naturedly. Daughter, even if you were to make selfish plans, I would still give you everything I have. That's why I dared to appear in your life, and hope to earn at least a little of your participation. I lived for many years without a family, woke up fearing nightmares. I was worried that my child was growing up in not superb conditions. But please don't deprive me of my last joy of meeting you. Please. Let me communicate with Hope. See her laughing while I still can. Juliana couldn't think of everything at once and decided to focus on the situation with Steve. She wanted to know what Brad had found out about him. Excuse me, Juliana turned to the maid. Who brought a tray of tea? Could you show my daughter this fairy tale house? She had been dreaming about it since the first minute of our visit. Of course, with pleasure, the woman replied softly and took the girl by the hand. Yay, Mummy, I will come back and tell you everything. Okay, sweetie, behave and don't make me worry about you. All right, Mum, I won't. She turned to her companion immediately. How many rooms are there here? Are there any secret passages? There should be, in every castle. So what do we know about my husband? Brad, are you certain that Steve is George from the wedding? Maybe they're twins. But if he is a real criminal, you must have facts, evidence, asked Juliana, trying to control her emotions. If he is a marriage swindler, he must answer for it. We need to find out everything and prevent new crimes. We know that he married a new victim, and she is rich. We need to hurry before another woman is left with a broken heart and a child in her arms. But if I didn't know about my real father, inheritance, how did my husband find out about it? I'm not sure, Brad replied. I've been following Steve for not so long, but he already deceived more than one woman. You were the first. We need to press on him somehow, forcing him to confess, because it will be difficult to prosecute him in all cases. Suddenly, Juliana had an idea. I know who can help us, but I don't remember anything except the name. During my pregnancy with Hope, I saw Steve in a cafe with some man. I was walking from the doctor and noticed them through the glass window. When I appeared in front of their table, Steve was clearly scared. He started to stutter and explain everything incoherently. The man was much older. I hadn't seen him before, and Steve didn't invite him to the wedding. He introduced him as a teacher. His name was Larry, and I remember his appearance vaguely. Only for a teacher he was too sloppy. It was difficult to imagine him in front of students at the lectern, but with a beer is perfect. I think I caught them off guard. Steve rarely introduced me to anyone, and it was evident that he didn't want to introduce me to this acquaintance of his. Could they be involved in something? It's quite possible. Mr. Davis nodded. He had no doubt that a skilled detective like Brad could get to the truth. Brad immediately thought about how to identify the stranger. I can try to find video recordings from that cafe or other places located nearby. The chances of success are almost zero. A lot of time has passed. Most security posts do not keep records for more than a few months, and here it's been almost 5 years. But luck smiled to Brad. He managed to recognize Steve's companion, who turned out to be his own father. Larry had 2 terms for fraud. Clark, as Steve was called in the birth certificate, had more attractiveness than his father, and Larry decided to take advantage of this to teach the boy to earn a living. But by this time, Larry was practically a lowlife who lived in a shack and did nothing but drink and sleep. Tell me everything, or you'll go for complicity. Brad pressed him against the wall, trying to get a confession. I taught him everything and he left me, complained the drunken man to Brad. He bathes in the money of his rich wives, but this ungrateful son forgot about his father. I'll tell you everything if you give me some money. Brad nodded in agreement and Larry started speaking. I'm the one who convinced my son to do scams. I was working on Mr. Davis and then he disappeared somewhere. But I had information about his daughter. The heiress grew up, so I sent Clark to her. I thought Mr. Davis would show up at the wedding. My son would become rich too, but nothing happened. Clark even got the girl pregnant, and her father still didn't show up. My son realized he had miscalculated, so he arranged his disappearance and then switched to another woman. That's it. Now give me my money for information. With the gathered facts and evidence, Brad went to the police to explain the case to his old comrades. Clark was caught rapidly, revealing his hiding place and several documents with different names, including a passport for Steve Hamilton. His new wife was horrified, imagining what damage her reputation and family life could have suffered by marrying such a despicable person. Everything's behind us, daughter. Mr. Davis comforted Juliana. In the past few months, Juliana had been visiting her father frequently. Deep down, she forgave him because her father couldn't do otherwise. If he had the opportunity, he would have raised her himself and given her a different life. Now she had to accept her fate and be happy that everything had been resolved. Despite her anger and resentment towards her ex-husband, Juliana never regretted the birth of Hope. Her daughter was her greatest joy and blessing. Meanwhile, Mr. Davis felt really bad. He was getting worse day by day, although numerous caregivers and doctors did everything to ease his suffering. I feel much better when I see your face, he admitted, holding his daughter's hand. Juliana accepted his offer and moved into his house with Hope. Juliana often cried when she was alone. She was about to lose another close person, and they had so little time. Brad tried to comfort her. The man could not remain indifferent to the fate of his client. He often visited her and brightened her days with some news. In a short time, Brad became her close friend and reliable supporter. He was there for her whenever she needed him, spent time with Hope, and asked for nothing in return. The feeling of mutual affection grew with immense force and was no longer a secret. "Daddy, I can't bear it!" Juliana wept when Mr. Davis was already on the brink. He could hardly move his tongue, and his family did not leave his side. Everyone was afraid of not having time to say goodbye. Hope sat calmly, feeling her grandfather's hand in her hair. She was also sad because her mother cried so much and her grandfather was in pain. "You can do it, my dear. We are the same kind.
Hold on to Brad. He is reliable. I'm very happy for you."
"We didn't tell you before. We didn't want to worry you," the daughter said through tears, unwilling to let go of her father. She wanted to keep him, to live together for at least a few more hours or days.
"I bless you, Brad. Take care of them. Now, you are the head of the family."
Many people came to accompany Mr. Davis on his last journey. Juliana did not know most of the guests, but accepted their sincere condolences. It took time before she could recover from the loss. After the will was announced, Juliana realized that now she had a sea of opportunities. Mr. Davis bequeathed to his daughter all his fortune, real estate and shares. "We can live without working for our whole lives," she said, hugging her fiancé. "We can have the wedding in space." "What a fantasy," Brad laughed. "Let's think of something more ordinary. What about going to the islands and renting a beautiful house with a view of the beach? We will live in peace. There are many activities for children in such places. Hope will love it. Now, my ex-boyfriend would strangle himself with resentment, knowing how much money is in my account." Juliana giggled, imagining Clark's annoyance. "Yes, he would try his best to make your head spin. And he doesn't give up, writing to you from prison, hoping to come back. I am even a little jealous," Brad teased, kissing his bride on the lips. "Too late. I'm already booked by the best man in the world." The couple invited only their closest friends, who had supported them through difficult times and were sincerely happy for their happiness. Toasts, music, and a river were forever preserved in the hearts of the newlyweds. Dressed up, Hope sat between Juliana and Brad, shining with happiness. "Now you will definitely be happy, Mum," the girl said, and joined the hands of her mother and stepfather. Beautiful wedding rings shimmered on their fingers. Caroline spent 2 hours spinning around in front of the mirror at the wedding salon. The dress looked magnificent on her slender figure, but she was very critical of her choice of outfit. After all, the most important day of her life was coming. "It's too flashy, like a queen's dress, but I want to be a princess," she declared. "And this one is too modest, not grand enough." Finally, after many attempts, she found it, the perfect dress. It was delicate and beautiful. At that moment, Caroline realized how happy she was. In 2 weeks, she would marry the person closest and dearest to her heart. Caroline was 22 years old and came from a wealthy family. From an early age, she was attached to her parents, who tried to give her everything. The girl received an excellent education, good manners, and upbringing. Perhaps that's why her father's money, a prominent entrepreneur in the city, didn't spoil her. She grew up intelligent, cultured, and kind. "Listen, daughter, go to law school. You'll become a first-class lawyer, and then I'll open the door to my business for you. When the time comes, I'll have to pass on my business to your reliable hands, even if they're not male. But you're smart, responsible, and have a business mindset. Or you'll manage," her father instructed her. If only he knew how much Caroline hated the seemingly boring legal science. She was drawn to art, and she wanted to be a sculptor, photographer, or an architect. However, to please her father, she enrolled in law school and forced herself to study those dull law articles. In her 3rd year of study, her soul could not take it anymore, and she begged, "Dad, this is not for me. I won't be able to do something I hate for my whole life. I'll fail." His daughter's sincere request melted Mr. Nordling's heart. even though he realized he was losing his only chance to pass the business to a relative person. But his love for his daughter was stronger than his personal ambitions. Caroline quitted law school and enrolled in the humanities department, majoring in art. That was her element, an eternal flight of fantasy. Her passion for beauty was so unrestrained that while still in college she became a photographer. With her father's help, the girl acquired a small space and equipped it as a photo studio. It was here that she met Kevin, her future husband. The young man, well-dressed and handsome, popped into the first photo studio he saw on his way to work one summer morning. Caroline's exams were over at the university, and now there was complete freedom until autumn. This meant that she could enjoy her favourite activity all day long. "Miss, can I have a passport photo? It won't take long, will it?" asked the stranger. "No, only about 10 minutes," Caroline replied happily, although this was far from the most exciting thing she could create in the world of photography. "Here, it's ready." Caroline handed the young man an envelope. "Well, I seem to look pretty good," the guy said cheerfully. Caroline couldn't help but smile and noticed the intense gaze of the green-eyed man on her. "Am I funny?" asked the guy in continued conversation. "You, on the other hand, are not funny. You're gorgeous." The girl smiled even more after such words. "I'm Kevin, and what's your name?" The guy seized the moment to introduce himself. "My name's Caroline," answered Caroline, to her surprise. She usually never introduced herself to clients, but something came over her today. Maybe it was an unusual morning, or the man was too attractive. "Nice to meet you, Caroline." Kevin smiled. "Would you mind if I drop by sometimes to chat about this and that?" "Yes, of course. Come by," Caroline replied. All day and evening the girl caught herself thinking about Kevin and wanting him to come back to the photo studio. She didn't even realize that Kevin's thoughts were also occupied with this. It seemed that someone from above had stretched an invisible thread between them that could not be broken. Kevin couldn't resist and visited Caroline again the next morning, and the next day, and the day after. Both of them understood that an inexplicable feeling attracted them to each other. Later, they called it love. A year of beautiful dates, travels, tender kisses, and strong embraces flew by unnoticed. On the anniversary of their meeting, Kevin proposed to Caroline. She gladly accepted. Before, she always thought that happiness was some abstract concept invented by unhappy people. But now she realized that it was not true. Happiness was in the love of a close person, and this person was next to her. Kevin managed not only to find the key to Caroline's heart, but also to approach her parents. The young man was 25 years old. He got food educated and worked as a chef accountant in one of the major commercial firms. It was impressive that Kevin came from an ordinary and far from prosperous family and achieved everything in life himself. When Mr. Nordling met his daughter's chosen one, he cheered up. "This is who I can pass on my business to later." Pleasant wedding preparations flew by, and the long-awaited day came for Caroline and Kevin, the wedding day. Finally, it was the turn of Caroline's snowy, airy, dreamlike dress and Kevin's stylish dark blue suit. The day was filled with joy and tenderness. The young couple experienced excitement and a sense of boundless happiness when they were announced husband and wife. The wedding took place in Caroline and Kevin's favourite vacation spot, a fashionable mansion not far from the city. The celebration was grand. Congratulations, music, jokes, cheerful laughter and gifts continued until late in the evening. It seemed that the holiday would never end. Caroline and Kevin were already dreaming of being alone. "Let's run away from everyone," Kevin smiled. "Let's go," Caroline replied resolutely. As they entered the room designated for their first wedding night, they gasped. At Kevin's request, the room was unusually and beautifully decorated, exceeding expectations. "And I have another gift for you," Kevin said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. It contained tickets and a tourist voucher for two for their honeymoon. "Kevin, you're a wizard!" exclaimed a delighted Caroline. "I have a gift for you, too. Close your eyes and don't open them until I say you can," whispered Caroline to her beloved. She knew that Kevin dreamed of learning scuba diving. In the gift box, the girl put indispensable swimming accessories and a certificate for a year of training from a professional. She put the box on the closet shelf so that Kevin wouldn't find out about the surprise in advance. If she could have looked into the future for even a second, she wouldn't have made this fatal mistake. But, alas. Standing on a chair to reach the box, Caroline accidentally stepped on the hem of her dress. Her foot tangled in numerous decorative folds. She lost her balance and fell, hitting her head. A strong, dull thud was heard. Kevin shuddered with his whole body, not understanding what had happened in the first few seconds. In the next moment, he saw Caroline lying next to the closet with blood stains on her head, dress and floor. She wasn't moving. Horror chilled Kevin's insides. He couldn't contain his emotional outburst and shouted as loud as he could. Relatives and some guests who hadn't left yet rushed to the cry. The rest was like a fog. The astonished faces of people who rushed into the room, an ambulance, paramedics, a stretcher, and the hand of his beloved girl, whom he held tightly. Hatred towards himself grew stronger. He blamed himself for listening to Caroline when she asked him to close his eyes, for not feeling that something terrible was going to happen. How could this be? They had always believed that there was a strong, invisible thread between them, so why did it break so suddenly at the first trial? What if Caroline didn't survive because she had hit her head? Kevin was going crazy with these thoughts and pushed them away. The doctors did everything possible, but the patient fell into a coma. Caroline's and Kevin's parents convinced the doctors to let the young man stay in the ward with his beloved wife. He practically didn't leave her bedside and even slept holding Caroline's hand. Every day he prayed as selflessly as women usually do. Men usually feel embarrassed, but not Kevin. He wanted to return his beloved at all costs. And a miracle happened. Early in the morning, Kevin suddenly felt Caroline's hand tremble and move in his hand. "Doctor, nurse, she's awake!" shouted Kevin, running out into the corridor. A moment later, the young woman slowly opened her eyes. "Caroline, my dear!" Kevin wanted to hug her. "Kevin, please calm down. You're like a possessed person. Leave the ward. I have to examine the patient," Dr. Duncan said sternly. Kevin had nothing left to do but leave the ward. The half hour spent in the corridor seemed like an eternity to him. He was waiting for the doctor like a hero who would surely heal his beloved Caroline. When the door opened, he was ready to hug the doctor if he gave him good news. "Dr. Duncan, how is she? Will she live?" Kevin asked anxiously, anticipating the doctor. "Young man, don't worry so much. Now I can say with complete confidence that yes, she will live. But it will take a lot of time for recovery. A cranial injury is not a scratch or a bruise. Be patient," the doctor reassured him. "Can I see her?" Kevin burst back into the room. "I'm sorry, but she won't be able to talk or show you the emotions you want to see right now. And she definitely shouldn't be overwhelmed by stress. You've already spent too much time with the patient in this hospital. When she's transferred to a regular ward, you can visit her there," the doctor said in an artificially serious tone. "Dr. Duncan," Just for 5 minutes, please. I need to see her eyes," Kevin pleaded, and the doctor couldn't resist the young man's powerful pressure. "My love, I'm happy everything will be fine now. Look at me, please," Kevin whispered, kissing Caroline's hand. The girl stopped, her incomprehensible gaze on Kevin for a few seconds, then abruptly turned her face away. Caroline, turn around," he repeated. "Kevin, I've told you that the patient is not ready to communicate yet, and your 5 minutes are long over. Let's go outside." "Finally, go home and rest. Your wife will be under the care of doctors," Dr. Duncan reassured him. Kevin obeyed and trudged home dejectedly. Not to their new apartment, no, he couldn't stay there without Caroline, but his old place, where he lived before he met her. He paced the rooms like a wounded animal, unable to understand why Caroline had turned away from him so rudely. Yes, the doctor said it wasn't time for emotions yet, but Kevin felt something wrong, as if the invisible thread connecting them had been severed. Unfortunately, Kevin's premonitions proved true. Caroline began to recover and slowly, step by step, returned to life. But to Kevin's horror, she didn't remember him. She forgot him. She forgot their love. She remembered her parents and other relatives, talked to them, but not Kevin. The woman even asked her father, "Who is the man who comes to see me?" "He's your husband, Kevin. Don't you remember him?" But Caroline just shook her head. "Dad, I'm not married, and I'm not interested in that right now. I need to finish law school and get a good job," the young woman said without a shadow of doubt. With this statement, Caroline plunged her father into shock. He came to his senses after a few seconds. "Daughter, you haven't been studying at the law school for a year. Your soul was drawn to beauty, so you enrolled in a university in the art department." Mr. Nordling tried to evoke memories in Caroline, but it was all in vain. The girl had completely forgotten the last 3 years of her life, a time when she had drastically changed, becoming a different person. "Doctor, how is this possible? What should we do now?" exclaimed Mr. Nordling and Kevin in horror. "Yes, it's possible. Partial amnesia is one of the consequences of a traumatic brain injury. She came out of a coma, which is already a miracle, and her memory may or may not be restored. Time will tell," the doctor replied significantly. 3 months later, the woman was discharged from the hospital. She was in a good mood and chatted happily with her parents and cousin Melanie. However, when it came to Kevin, she treated him like someone trying to be friends with her, just like she would with a maid, a security guard, or a driver. This was like a knife to Kevin's heart, but he didn't give up and decided to do everything to restore Caroline's memory. He intended to help her remember him and their love no matter what. Kevin went all in and offered Caroline to live in an apartment bought for them as a wedding gift. The apartment was 2 bedrooms, and everyone would live in their own room. There she is, my Caroline, so close yet so far away. How can she feel nothing while being next to me? Just 4 months ago we were a passionate couple and couldn't spend a day without each other. And now, Kevin thought, oh, why did I say we were? I still love her as much as before, so I don't have the right to give up. And he didn't give up, and continued to make new attempts to win back his girlfriend. He showed her photos of the wedding and the celebration, but Caroline looked at them indifferently, as if it didn't happen to her. Kevin was surprised every time how it could be forgotten. It's you, Caroline. Remember how you chose your wedding dress for a long time? How you promised to love me in sorrow and joy? Kevin said, hopeful that she would remember something. He told her about their wedding with deep emotion and kept asking, Do you remember? Do you remember? But nothing touched Caroline's soul. and she was only angry with Kevin. "Why are you nagging me? I don't remember anything. I'm tired of it. I don't even understand why I'm here. And why do I have to live in this apartment with you instead of at home with my parents?" Caroline said. "I'm sorry, Caroline. I didn't mean to be annoying," Kevin replied, sighing sadly. Despite constantly trying to please his wife, it didn't bring back her lost memories. She became irritable and uncontrollable. Everything made her angry, from the apartment's decor to the colour of her cup. One day, when Kevin came home from work, he found Caroline packing. "I'm leaving to my parents. I can't listen to your suffering and love stories anymore. I don't remember you, and that's it," Caroline said confidently. 30 minutes later she left, slamming the door loudly, and it seemed to Kevin that this door had closed on his heart, which would never open again. Kevin wanted to scream for helplessness, but his voice disappeared somewhere. He had lost Caroline. On a sleepless night, Kevin wondered what he had done wrong to deserve such treatment from Caroline, but he couldn't find any reasons. "Don't give up. Don't give up," cried his inner voice. For a moment he pictured Caroline's face in her wedding dress, so tender, beloved and dear. "No, I won't give up. No way. We just have to wait it out." Caroline's parents were upset that she had left Kevin, but there was nothing to be done. It was her choice, although it was wrong. One morning, to everyone's surprise, Caroline announced that she wanted to continue her studies at the law school. "But daughter, you left there a long time ago. You didn't like it there, and it's too late to recover after such a long time," Mr. Nordling tried to dissuade her. "Well, Daddy, you have so many acquaintances and connections. Someone will help me. I just have to continue my education and get a degree," Caroline pleaded with him. In front of the prominent businessman that her father was, all the doors in the city were open, or practically all of them. The school door was no exception. Caroline was accepted, but the first few months of studying were so difficult that she impulsively ran away. "Caroline, why are you putting me in such a difficult position? How do I look in people's eyes now? They did me a huge favour of taking you," her father said, hurt in his voice. "Dad, tell me how it was before. Did I ever quit law school?" Caroline unexpectedly asked. "Daughter, did you remember something?" Mr. Nordling was surprised, hoping for a miracle. "No, Dad, it's just at the subconscious level. I just feel like I've already experienced the feeling of making the wrong decision." Although it was just a feeling, Mr. Nordling was delighted. It was a small step towards returning her memory. Caroline dropped out of law school again, where she was reinstated after losing her memory, and decided to live separately from her parents, renting an apartment in the city. After a short time, she became interested in sculpture and photography. Caroline decided to return to studying art. She once again felt that this was her element, her space, where she felt comfortable. "Dad, let's buy a small space where I can work on photos and sculptures," Caroline said. Mr. Nordling was overjoyed at such a turn of events. After all, his daughter, just like before, was changing her lifestyle. She gradually became the one who had once met Kevin and fell in love with him. "Caroline, my dear, we already have a space waiting for its owner." From that moment on, Caroline's life began anew. She pursued her favourite hobby. Her hands created sculptures and beautiful photographs. The girl organised photo shoots and exhibitions. Caroline's work did not go unnoticed. She gained her own regular clients, admirers of her revived talent. People say that love comes suddenly. So, suddenly and unexpectedly, a real miracle happened in Caroline's life. On an ordinary evening, she was going through old things and found a pledge of fidelity and love to a young man, written in her own hand a year ago on the card. She swore she would always love him and marry Kevin. Caroline couldn't remember when or how it happened, but she felt what she felt at that moment, trembling joy and happiness that needed to be cherished and never lost. Her hands reached for the phone and she dialed the number Kevin had left when she left him. "Kevin, do you want to meet and talk? I have something for you," Caroline said mysteriously. "Yes, give me the address, I'll come," Kevin replied. How surprised he was when he heard the same address where the photo studio was, where he and Caroline had met before. Kevin firmly decided not to ask any more questions like, "Do you remember?" or not. He would win Caroline's heart for the second time. When he walked into the studio, there was his Caroline, the same one he saw here for the first time. Beautiful, sunny, smiling, gentle. "Kevin, hi, sorry for disturbing. Look what I found." And Caroline handed Kevin a card with the pledge. He smiled and said, "Now look what I have," and gave Caroline another piece of paper. It was the same card with the same words as Caroline's, only written in Kevin's hand. "How did you know I found this?" Caroline asked in amazement. "I didn't need to guess. This pledge is always with me," Kevin replied, and a moment later he added, "I invite you on a date tonight. Will you come?" Caroline blushed and barely whispered, "Yes." Kevin was happy. He had never lost hope of reviving their love. The man decided to invite her to the places that had once helped the beginnings of their relationship. Caroline didn't remember these places, but she remembered pleasant, warm emotions. It was like watching an old but favourite movie again. One day, Kevin took Caroline to the shores of the lake where they had decided to swim every month after hearing the story of eternal youth from a 70-year-old waiter. And Kevin, of course, remembered that April when the water in the lake was still cold, but the young people still swam and ran to warm up in the car. Now, in October, they just walked along the beach, and Caroline reached out her frozen hands to Kevin, and he warmed them with his breath. Soon, Kevin and Caroline started dating every day. Caroline didn't have time to understand when it happened, but she thought about Kevin and always looked forward to the evening. After a little more time, they started a life path together again. What it would be like depended on them, but it's hoped that love would forever reside in their hearts. Take care and love each other under any circumstances, no matter what happens. And then happiness will always be with you. "Doug, come here quickly." The excited mother-to-be called her husband Doug to feel the amazing manifestation of the life growing inside her by putting his hand on her belly. "I don't feel anything." Doug's voice sounded a little disappointed. "Just wait a minute. He's probably hiding. He'll start moving again soon." Joan and Doug had been married for a year already, and the little one who decided to greet his parents that day was welcome and already deeply loved. Not long ago, the baby stopped tormenting his mum with manifestations of toxemia, and Joan finally began to enjoy her pregnancy. Doug secretly dreamed that the baby would be a boy. From the moment they met at the cafe where Joan worked as a waitress, they knew they could easily find a common language. Later, when they started dating, they learned to negotiate in any difficult situation. But when it came to choosing a name for their future heir, they could not reach an understanding. "I want the boy to have a real masculine name, not some trendy nonsense," Doug insisted. Joan was secretly sure that she would have a girl, but if a boy was born, she did not want to give in to her husband's name choice. She suspected that all his ideas on this matter came from her mother-in-law. Until the baby was born, the newlyweds lived separately with Doug's parents. But with the arrival of the child, Joan had to move to Doug's mother's house, and this prospect did not please her at all. "Maybe I can handle the baby by myself," Joan begged her husband. "You just don't realise how hard it is with newborns yet. My mum told me, and your parents live far away. But even if your mother decides to drop everything and come to help you, I won't be able to handle it myself. You know my character. But your mother doesn't seem too happy when I just come to visit, and now I'm going to live under her roof with a newborn." "Oh, don't make things up, Joan. Mum is quite a difficult person, but she's kind at heart, just a little grumpy. But that's our family trait. Wait, I'll become like that soon, apparently. Will you stop loving me then?" Joan laughed in response and as always agreed with her beloved. In her eyes, he was a great authority. A guy from a good family who graduated from a prestigious university in the capital appeared in her life suddenly. Serving another coffee to a customer, she caught his brown eyes staring at her and even blushed a little. In the evening, Joan was already waiting for his call, and the next weekend she went on a date with him. 2 months passed, Doug made her a proposal, and they started living together. His mother, Mrs. Poust, was not too happy with the outcome of their hasty affair, thinking that her son was still too young and that the experienced girl had simply seduced him. But her son just laughed in response to his mother's concerns. He was happy with Joan, and since she got pregnant, he was ready to carry his beloved on his hands. As a child, Doug had mumps and was afraid he wouldn't be able to become a father, as his mother warned him several times. But all his worries were in vain, and the spouses eagerly awaited the arrival of their firstborn. The remaining month until the birth passed quickly, and soon the new father was holding his son. Doug named him Oliver, just as his mother had dreamed. After giving birth, Joan felt very weak, so she did not object to the baby's name or move to Mrs. Poust's house. However, it was not very pleasant for her to live there. Mrs. Poust was practically dissatisfied with everything all the time, and the baby did not evoke warm and tender feelings from her, which could be expected from a grandmother. Rather, she just tolerated him. But the reason was that the first look at the newborn, Mrs. Poust convinced herself that the child did not look like her son, and no assurances that he was just too young to look like anyone else convinced her. "I'm sure he's not your son," she constantly whispered to Doug. "Look, he doesn't look like you or her. He is so fair-skinned, and his eyes are nothing like yours. You were born with eyes as dark as a blueberry, and your skin was tanned, but this baby is so white." "Mum, it happens that children look more like their grandmothers, grandfathers, and even great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers. Joan's cousin is a blonde." "She probably dyes her hair," his mother retorted. "Mum, don't be ridiculous, okay?" Doug replied. "Oliver is my son and I love him." Time passed, and the young family still had to live in Mrs. Poust's house. Joan begged Doug to move out and live separately, but he just shrugged it off. He had a new job with a good position, and he had to travel on business trips constantly, leaving his wife and son in his mother's care. Then he started returning like a stranger, and Joan gradually began to suspect something was wrong. Doug's mood swings, his indifference, followed by increased attention to her with bouquets of flowers and gifts that no longer pleased her. Seeing all this, Joan got afraid that Doug was cheating on her. One evening, while picking up his shirts from his travel bag, Joan noticed a trace of lipstick on the collar. It was like an electric shock to her. Her worst suspicions were confirmed. With trembling hands, Joan reached for her husband's phone. Why did Doug lock it? He had never done that before. What is he hiding? Joan wanted to understand whether she was becoming paranoid, trying to catch her husband cheating. Maybe it was just because she had been at home with the baby for so long and gained weight, losing her confidence. Perhaps she was not as attractive to him anymore. Joan, like many women, excused her husband, looking for the cause in herself, but she could not sleep peacefully until she finally confirmed her suspicions or denied them. Doug was still affectionate with her, but he became somewhat distant. He practically did not leave his phone unattended, and if there was a sudden call, he immediately left the room. And then one day Joan got lucky. Her husband had just finished a phone call when his mother called him and he left, forgetting his mobile on the nightstand next to the bed. Joan grabbed it as if a hungry person used to grab a piece of bread. She wanted to know the truth, whatever it was. There was nothing suspicious among the calls, except that the name of someone named Andrew appeared too often, and Joan decided to take a risk. She pressed the call button, but instead of a male voice, she heard a woman's voice. "Yes, Doug? You forgot to say something, darling? Did you change your mind about coming?" Joan silently pressed the reset button on her phone and carefully placed it back in its place. She felt like she had fallen into a stupor. Her life seemed to have instantly shattered into a million tiny shards. "What will happen to us now?" she thought. "How could this be happening? And what should I do now?" Doug did not notice the change in his wife. He was sharing some plans with her, but Joan could not understand their meaning. She simply could not hear anything. Her husband suddenly seemed completely unfamiliar to her, and her entire life with him ended abruptly, like a dream. "I want to go visit Heidi tomorrow. Oliver and I will stay with her for a couple of days. She misses me," said Joan to her husband. Joan's sister lived on the other side of the city and had indeed invited her to come and visit. It was convenient to leave now and not have to look her husband in the eye, listening to his babbling or endure his touch. Joan had to stop and figure out what to do next, and so she left. Her sister happily welcomed her with the baby, and after hearing Joan's story, she began to convince her that everything happening in her life was fixable. Joan simply needed to distract herself and focus on herself, not just her family. First, Heidi decided that Joan needed to be among people again and show everyone that she was still a wow. A party at a friend's house seemed to her to be the best option for a triumphant return to the scene. And, after calling a nanny for 3-year-old Oliver, the girls went to drink champagne and impress men. Heidi's friend, the host of the party, introduced Joan to his friend Harry. He looked too mature and serious, but at the same time, he turned out to be a very interesting conversationalist. It was a new experience for Joan. Besides, it was so important for her to understand if she still attracted men or if something was irreparably broken in her. Harry spent the whole evening charming the girl. Her anger at her husband and the abundance of not-so-childish drinks did the job. Joan, quite drunk, woke up the next morning in the arms of an almost stranger. While she was gathering her things in panic, realizing that something even more terrible had happened in her life than her husband's hypothetical infidelity, Harry called her a taxi and bought her coffee. Heidi just laughed at her sister's fears. She was glad that Joan had distracted herself and taken revenge on her husband for his infidelity, and she even offered Joan to stay with Oliver at her place and take a break from her years of bondage. "You have suffered enough with this family. It happens to everyone. No problem. Have a good time, then it won't hurt if that dog keeps running away," she persuaded Joan, but she was adamant. She took Oliver and decided to return home to her husband. At home, she was greeted by a dissatisfied mother-in-law who immediately began to scold Joan for her irresponsibility and for missing the paediatrician's visit. They were about to take Oliver to daycare and they were gathering the necessary documents. Joan hoped to find a job and firmly decided to leave her mother-in-law's house with or without her husband. "Where have you been? And why are you dragging your child around with you?" Mrs. Poust began to reproach her. "I was with Heidi. She needed my support," Joan lied, blushing. "And I don't need support here, do I? I can't ask for my son. He's always on the road. You're not much better. You'd better help me around the house, not comfort anyone, you see." Her mother-in-law persisted. Joan didn't argue. She was ashamed of her mistake, so she kept quiet. She hoped that her random affair would remain in the past and eventually stop gnawing at her conscience with guilt. But things happened differently. Harry got Joan's phone number with Heidi's help, and Joan didn't understand why she agreed to meet him. The new acquaintance was a well-known artist and a creative person in life. Joan found him incredibly interesting. However, he had once experienced a tragedy. Shortly before his wedding, he and his bride crashed their car. The bride died on the way to the hospital, and doctors fought for Harry's life for a long time. He survived and spent long months in a hospital bed, where he started to draw. That's what happens to people sometimes. They study or work somewhere and don't even suspect what talents lie within them, until their lives turn around or circumstances arise that give them the opportunity and time to listen to themselves and show their previously dormant abilities. And Harry had both. Joan was very similar to his dead bride, Bonnie, and he was ashamed that he had treated her like that evening. He literally used her family problems and drunkenness. To him, it was as if he had not been with Joan that night, but his dead bride had come to him to console him. But over time he realized that he thought more and more about Joan as herself, not as a girl who reminded him of Bonnie. The former pain of loss and guilt, like a black thundercloud pouring rain, was going further and further beyond the horizon, and a light sadness and incipient trepidation appeared in his soul, and it was reflected in his paintings. And all this was reflected in his paintings. Occasionally, Joan visited her sister. At home, her mother-in-law still grumbled. Her husband was just as indifferent, and he had distanced himself from her even more over the year. At some point, Joan stopped being afraid that her affair would be discovered in the family, and even deep down in her heart, she wanted her deception to be exposed and everything to eventually end. That's why, when someone, perhaps even Doug's next passion, decided to enlighten Mrs. Poust about her daughter-in-law, Joan was very happy about it. "Why do you pretend that you don't know that your son and I have long been strangers and just live under the same roof? He is not a saint, just like me," Joan shouted at her mother-in-law in response to the insults. "Oh, you promiscuous woman! I suspected from the very beginning that your son was also born out of wedlock. You won't get anything from us, neither you nor your blonde-haired brat. Get out of my house. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I'll do it with pleasure. Just don't expect Doug to easily give up his son. This is his child. It can be easily proven. I even insist on a DNA test." "You're completely crazy. Are we going to waste money on tests? Just get out of our lives and leave my son alone." But the test was still done, because Doug's mother was very reluctant to support someone else's child after the divorce, and recently she was sure that the child was not his. Joan was surprised when her triumphant mother-in-law thrust a document in her face, clearly indicating that the degree of relationship between Oliver and Doug was 0%. "This can't be. Only Doug could be the father of my son," she cried on the phone while talking to Harry. "Then you need to do another test," Harry suggested. "They won't agree, and we don't need their consent. If you're sure he's the father, there's only one option left. We need to check your relationship with the child." At first, Joan didn't want to hear about it, but Harry managed to convince her, and it turned out to be worth it. The DNA test did not confirm her relationship to the baby. How is that possible? Joan couldn't believe the numbers clearly printed on the paper. "This is not my baby. Then where is the child I gave birth to?" That was the main question that Harry began to work on right away. First, they went to the maternity hospital where Oliver was born and found out that there were 3 other mothers there that day. 2 had girls and only 1, like Joan, gave birth to a boy. That's when they began to search for this woman, putting all their efforts into it. It turned out that finding her was not that easy, as the address listed in the documents was no longer her residence. They didn't know where she had gone. The neighbours told them that the family was disadvantaged and that no one took care of the children. "She's a drinker," said a former neighbour, "and her husband was an alcoholic too. They seem to have gone somewhere to earn money, and the youngest boy was with them while the older one was taken away by Child Protective Services." It took months to search. Harry had taken Joan and Oliver to live with him, was sure of success, even when Joan was almost desperate. They also looked for Oliver's biological father, whose information Harry was able to obtain through a friend who served with the authorities. Soon they found out that the family moved in with the husband's sister, where they drank together and repeatedly got into trouble with the police. The child's mother had recently died, and the father was caught stealing again. So Joan's own child was left, in essence, an orphan, and probably lived with his aunt. This was such a horrifying thought. Joan didn't want to wait a second. She was afraid that something bad could happen to her own son at any moment, or he could be taken away by strangers, like his older brother. She and Harry went to the specified address on the same day. The door was not locked. Joan crossed the threshold and recoiled, struck by the stench that hit her nose. The apartment was filled with the stench of unwashed bodies, alcohol, and garbage. Among all this nightmare, there was nowhere to see the child. "Tommy?" Joan called out in a quiet voice. She already knew that her own son was named Tom, and now, as gently as possible, not to scare the boy, she called him by name for the first time. "Tommy, please respond." "What the hell are you doing here?" A dishevelled, drunk woman appeared in the doorway. Her jacket was greasy, and her hair hadn't seen a comb in a long time. "What, Tommy? What are you talking about? Did you come for your man? Which one is yours, huh?" And she kicked the unconscious man lying on the floor. "This one, maybe?" "No, I need a boy named Tommy, your nephew." "This parasite? The little rat probably hid somewhere again. Hey, have you seen the brat?" She kicked the sleeping drunk again. "What do I need him for?" muttered the man. "Most likely wandering around the station again. I'll teach him a lesson when he gets back, so he won't be wandering around." And the man lay back down on the floor and snorted. "Go to the train station and find your Tommy," the woman snarled fiercely before slamming the front door shut. Joan couldn't believe what she was hearing and seeing. How could fate take her own little baby and throw him into such a hellish situation? But Harry was more focused than ever. He picked up the completely weakened Joan, and soon his car was already speeding them to the nearest train station. "We need to ask the beggars," If Tommy appears at the station not for the first time, they already know him, Harry said as he began searching for someone who could tell him about the boy. Most of the beggars hurried to leave when he started questioning them about the little beggar, but an old man agreed to show him where to find the boy. He often hides here when his aunt beats him. We often beg together. You won't hurt him, will you? He's a good kid. He just didn't have any luck in life, the child's friend explained. The boy was sleeping on boxes. He couldn't understand anything in his sleep and only rubbed his eyes with his dirty fists. Why does the beautiful woman call him so affectionately Tommy? And why does she swear to him that she is his mother? He thought, bewildered. My mother died. I only have a dad, but they put him in jail again. I'm hiding from my aunt here, the boy replied. Son, your mother is alive. I am your real mother. You were just taken away from me, Joan said, looking at the child with tears in her eyes. The boy looked at Joan's kind, tearful face with disbelief, and somewhere, deep down in his soul, he wanted her words to be true. He had suffered so much in this life that he wanted to believe with all his heart that his mother would not run away from him now. He would finally be loved and taken care of. Joan hugged his fragile body and pressed him to herself. Their hearts beat loudly in unison, and they both felt that nothing would separate them now. Joan took the little boy away, and she and Harry achieved recognition of their relationship through the court. Tommy never met the angry aunt again. He met Oliver, and Joan was happy. Both of her boys, the most beloved and dear little people in the world, quickly became friends. They felt like real brothers, boys born on the same day, even though they had different parents. They found true maternal love and care in Joan, and Harry was always there, becoming not only husband to Joan, but also the best father to these different but so dear boys to his heart. It was just an ordinary weekend, a beautiful summer day. The family had breakfast on the summer terrace of their small but cosy mansion. The head of the family, Bernard, sipped fragrant brewed coffee and read the latest news while eating steaming fluffy cottage cheese pancakes. The hostess of the house, Helen, ate oatmeal with milk, and their beloved daughter, 20-year-old Alanis, was drinking apple juice. The mother looked at her child and noticed her gloomy face and dark circles under her eyes. Alanis, you need to eat a proper breakfast. You're just drinking juice. You've become so thin, and it's because of your diet. You'll get sick soon. Have a pancake, or at least eat a couple of spoonfuls of oatmeal. The girl protested. Mum, why are you treating me like a child? I'm already an adult, and the wedding is coming soon. I won't eat your oatmeal with butter and milk, or else I won't fit in my dress. God forbid Mark stops loving me. He only likes skinny girls. Helen threw up her hands in frustration and said, Oh, daughter, you're so in love with Mark that you don't notice anything else. You shouldn't rush with the wedding. You've only been dating for 3 months. Is that enough time? Your father and I have been together since school. Alanis grimaced and said, Oh, Mum, don't start with your lectures. I've heard it 100 times. It's so boring to date for so many years. You can get bored with each other 100 times. My Mark is so handsome, and he's involved in creative business, so I'm very lucky. All the girls envy me. He's not a soppy classmate, he's a businessman. The mother became angry and said, Alanis, listen to me for once. Your father is also involved in business, selling office equipment. It's simple and clear, without any deception. What does your fiancé do? Everything is so unclear. It's all a sham. He spouts nonsense to people, and they stupidly pay him for it. You just don't understand anything, Alanis responded tearfully. He conducts trainings and coaching sessions, helps people find themselves in life and raises their self-esteem. Every week he has a full house, and even wealthy people attend his intensives. And he's also involved in cryptocurrency. It's so popular and promising right now. We live in a world of advanced technology, and you're still measuring everything by old standards. For you, business is selling tomatoes at the market. No one earns money that way anymore. Dad, at least you tell Mom. Bernard looked lovingly at his dear ladies and said peaceably, "Girls, don't argue. Helen, why are you picking on the child? Personally, I really like Mark. He's articulate, tenacious, and aware of current trends. Things have really changed a lot now. Young people know how to earn money in an entirely different way." Helen fell silent and pursed her lips, thinking to herself, "Well, I'll figure out how to check you, dear son-in-law." After breakfast, Alanis rushed off to her date. She was simply crazy about her fiancé. Mark courted her so beautifully, always coming up with something interesting. Today, for example, they agreed to go to a country beach, swim and sunbathe. Alanis threw a towel, tanning lotion and sunglasses into her beach bag and didn't even suspect anything. But when Mark brought her there, she was simply amazed. The guy had set up a truly heavenly spot. He spread out a blanket and took out icy drinks, fruits and even ice cream. Everything was charming. It was a romantic scene, refreshing water splashing, the wind blowing, and her beloved by her side. Alanis felt happy beyond words, thinking that life would always be this easy and magical. After all, they were young, in love, and had their whole lives ahead of them. Meanwhile, Helen and her husband stayed at home that day. Bernard rarely had a day off from his demanding job, so the couple cherished every moment they spent together. They sat for a long time, embracing each other on the terrace, reminiscing about their school years and youth. Alanis's parents had been inseparable since they were in school, so there was a lot to remember. Helen grew up in a poor family. Her father was a vocational teacher, and her mother was a cleaner at a roadside cafe. They were paid very little. Her mother wore the same old worn coat and shoes for years, and her father was frugal with everything. The table was almost always set with fried potatoes or pasta, and meat and delicacies they saw only on a big holiday. Although Helen's parents saved for themselves, they tried to buy all the necessary things for their only daughter. Helen loved her parents very much and tried to ask for as few toys and new things as possible, understanding that things were already difficult for them. Seeing all this, she decided very early on that she would be an honour student, get a good profession, and leave for the capital, never repeating her parents' fate. This became her goal, and she worked hard towards it from the first grade on. Her teacher always praised her, but her peers disliked her, considering her a nerd and a bookworm. There was another outcast in the class, a boy named Bernard. He was from a troubled family, raised by an elderly grandmother, and his unfortunate parents were always lost in their drunkenness. They didn't care where their son was or if he ate. Therefore, the child was often beaten, wore shabby clothes from someone else's shoulder, and barely studied. He was constantly bullied by the boys, teased for being hungry, and made fun of because he had a severe stutter and couldn't even pronounce his own name properly. When the teacher called the boy to the board, the class immediately burst into laughter and mockery. Due to distant bullying, Bernard was silent and withdrawn, hardly speaking to anyone. He often skipped school and ran away from lessons. One day, during a break, the class teacher approached Helen. "Helen, you are smart, the class president, and an honour student. I have a big request for you. Take Bernard under your wing. You see, he has potential. I feel it. He can do well. But as you can see, no one is helping him, and he's being bullied. Maybe you can help him a little. Otherwise, I'm afraid he won't even pass the exams. It's a pity for the boy." The girl was not thrilled with this offer. She didn't want to deal with this pimply silent guy at all, but as a responsible and diligent person, she couldn't refuse the teacher and promised to help. That same day after classes, she approached the boy. "So, Bernard, our teacher asked me to help you with literature and math. So whether you like it or not, we're going to my place to study. I'll help you as much as I can. Otherwise, you will stay on for the second year, to the delight of your bullies." The boy looked at her intently and asked quietly, "If you don't tease me, I agree." They became friends after that. Helen took an active role in their friendship, and by the end of the year, Bernard went from being a poor student to a good one, surprising everyone. It turned out that he was smart and clever, but he felt very shy due to his speech defect and poverty. But Helen convinced him to fight. "Don't give up, Bernard. I brought special literature from the library and will do special exercises to improve your speech. And what if it helps? Don't stutter. Don't be afraid of Craig. He only looks scary, but he's just an ordinary boy. Whether you beat him or not doesn't matter. The main thing is not to give up. Show him that you're not afraid and fight back. You're strong. We'll figure something out about your clothes too. My mum sews great, and if you get a piece of fabric, she can easily sew you a couple of shirts that are no worse than store-bought. We'll find you some shoes on sale on weekends. I'm also very resourceful. As you can see, I don't dress in boutiques either." The boy suddenly took her hand and looked at her warmly. "Thank you, Helen. You're my only real friend. Only you understand me. You're not ashamed. You're helping me. My parents don't need me. It's so unfair. And my grandma is already old. She can't take care of me alone. It would have been better not to have been born at all." The girl tried to encourage him. "Don't worry. School will be over soon. Let's apply to college together. It's easier that way. I'm not really getting along with my friends either. They think I'm a bore. What am I supposed to talk to them about? Fashionable clothes, which I don't have? Or about where they went on vacation while I was with my mum picking strawberries in the field to raise extra money? They'll just laugh. But it's easy and peaceful with you. You're just like me. I've seen you carrying boxes to the market in the evenings to make a little money. We're made of the same dough. So we need to stick together. Forget about them and believe in yourself. We'll make it." Thanks to Helen's care and attention, Bernard stuttered less and was able to resist the bully Craig. He overcame his fear and grabbed the cheeky teenager by the collar, shouting loudly, "If you touch me or Helen again, I'll beat you up. Got it?" The other boys were stunned, but kept quiet. After that, classmates just grinned at Helen and Bernard, whispering, "Sweet couple. Two boring people found each other." But they didn't pay attention and stubbornly pursued their goal. Alanis's parents had long since become accustomed to Bernard and considered him their own son. Despite their difficult financial situation, they didn't mind sharing their soup or potato portions with him, and he never left their family hungry. On the contrary, they encouraged and praised the boy for his academic achievements, understanding how important they were to him, since his parents didn't care about their son's fate. Father was calm about his daughter, who didn't go out at night and was always under supervision, so Bernard was always welcome in their family. The next thing in Helen and Bernard's lives was college. It was hard to study in a big city without support. Other parents used to help their children with money, but Bernard got nothing. It was during this period that Bernard discovered his entrepreneurial vein. On weekends, he went to the night wholesale market, bought popular goods among young people in bulk, and then sold them a little more expensively at retail. The profit was small, but it was enough for him and Helen to live on and buy clothes. The girl was not idle and worked as a tutor, wrote essays and controlled papers for careless students, for a small fee, and also became deeply involved in a theatre group. She loved applying makeup and participating in student plays and concerts. It was her favourite hobby and an outlet, and she completely immersed herself in the chosen image. So they walked hand in hand with Bernard, never parting for a moment. They got married modestly after receiving their coveted diploma. It was their common victory. After university, they lived in a tiny studio. Tiny studio for a long time. Bernard went into business. Things started to work out, and eventually they bought a spacious apartment, then a house, and a car. They got a daughter, and Helen devoted herself entirely to her family, only tutoring for her soul. Alanis grew up smart and clever, studied well, and even got into a prestigious university. The parents loved their daughter very much and could not get enough of her. Life passed by quickly. Helen had become so close to her husband over the years that they could predict each other's moods and desires without a word, and they were literally one. The woman never regretted that she had lived her life with Bernard, because such a loyal and faithful husband could never be found. There were never any turbulent passions or fiery confessions between them, even in their youth. They just fit together like two puzzle pieces in a single picture. But in the matter of their daughter's marriage, their views diverged radically for the first time. Helen did not like her future son-in-law from the start. She felt that Mark would not look her in the eye, and he was somehow sly. Helen could understand her daughter. She was a love-stricken girl, but to her great surprise, her husband stood aside their daughter and was eagerly preparing with her for the wedding. They had already chosen the restaurant and discussed the menu. For some reason, he saw his successor in Mark and hoped that the son-in-law would gradually become involved in his business and continue his work. But Helen decided not to give up so easily. It was not in her character, and she took matters into her own hands. The woman got makeup, a wig with long black hair, green contact lenses, and a special mouth guard that was inserted into the mouth and entirely changed a person's face and speech. She also borrowed a long, colourful gown from acquaintances in the theatre studio. After 3 hours of work in front of the mirror, an old fortune-teller stood instead of a well-groomed 45-year-old blonde. Helen searched the internet for the address of Mark's company, which was called The Way for Yourself. All their intensives and training sessions took place in various rented premises around the city, and the address of the company itself was in an industrial zone on the outskirts. Helen decisively went there, inventing a story on the way about how she needed to increase her self-esteem, and so on. The services of the company were chargeable, and she had to take quite a bit of money with her. All this looked more like scamming people than any serious organisation. The woman in disguise was walking down the corridor when she saw a happy, glowing girl about Alanis's age in an ultra-short dress come out of the office, followed by a happy Mark. They hugged and started kissing passionately, cooing about their own things and not noticing anyone or anything around them. Mark whispered hot words of love to her, and the young flirt laughed and swooned. "Oh, scumbag! So you're even cheating on my daughter," thought Helen in rage. "What a villain! The wedding is in a couple of weeks and he's fooling around here. I'll teach you respect for women." Passing supposedly by and deliberately, loudly stomping her feet, as elderly people usually do, Helen suddenly stopped and, looking Mark in the eye, hoarsely said, "Hello, young man. I see that great happiness awaits you. Your destiny is interesting. Let me tell you your fortune. You won't regret it. You'll learn everything that was and will be." Mark was taken aback and asked, "Who are you, and why did you come here?" Helen confidently replied, "I'm a psychic named Juliana. Haven't you heard of me? I decided to sign up for your training because, even though I help others
and give all of myself, nothing seems to work out in my own life. I'm completely at a loss. Maybe you can help me. I've heard great things about your company and how people find the meaning of life with you. It seems like you have great specialists. So what do you say? Do you want to know what's in store for you? I won't even take your money. I'll just tell you everything honestly, as I see it.
Mark became interested, especially as the girl next to him was watching everything with wide eyes and obvious interest, and he waved his hand, saying, "All right then, I may not believe in all this fortune-telling, but it's still interesting to hear what you have to say. At least I'll have some fun." Helen barely contained herself. She was furious like a tiger and thought, "Ooh, you'll have fun all right." Helen took Mark's hand, rolled her eyes as expected, remained silent for a long time, then suddenly announced, "You're about to get married. But not to her, to another girl. Her name is Alanis. She's rich, her parents have money, and you've already booked a restaurant. Alanis loves you so much, but she's not your destiny. You don't need her, and you won't be happy together. That's what I see." Mark's face changed and he shouted, "Who are you, old woman, and how do you know all this?" The man suddenly looked at the fortune-teller closely. Her image seemed somehow familiar to him. He stepped up to the woman and pulled off her wig. Helen spit out her cap and triumphantly declared, "Well, gotcha, son-in-law. Your company is fake. I've checked everything. You're simply cheating people for money. And you're cheating on my daughter with this girl. Have you completely lost your conscience?" The girl standing next to him burst into tears and slapped Mark with a resounding blow, saying, "You wretch! I hate you! So you sing to me about love every day, and then it occurs to you that you marry someone else? Well, you'll pay for everything. I know better than anyone that all these trainings are just scams, and now everyone will find out about it. I'll make sure of it. You'll learn your lesson about how to deceive women." The girl ran away in tears, and Mark tried to justify himself. You didn't understand everything correctly. I love Alanis, honestly, and that's all. It's not serious. Please forgive me." "Get out of our lives. There won't be a wedding," Helen harshly told him. "You'll tell everything to Alanis yourself, and without lying. And be glad that I haven't reported your dark deeds to the police." Mark had nothing else to do but confess to Alanis about his infidelity, and the wedding was cancelled. Although Alanis loved Mark, she couldn't forgive such betrayal. After graduation, she got a job as an economist in a decent private company, and it was there that she found her true love a year later. Lou was her boss. From the first day, he was attracted to Alanis, but he didn't dare to confess or even hint at it. He saw how Alanis immediately put an end to any attempts by male colleagues to get to know her. The girl was always thoughtful and sad, but very responsible and hard-working. Lou was 10 years older than Alanis. His business was inherited from his father, and he managed it skillfully. But his personal life was not going well. He always dreamed of finding someone like his mother who could manage the household and be a friend and lover. But unfortunately, he only came across greedy gold diggers who only knew how to demand gifts and travel. Years went by. His parents had already passed away, and Lou lived all alone in a huge house, apart from the maid who came and the fluffy cat. Sometimes he didn't want to go home because no one was waiting for him there. But Alanis turned everything around in the man's soul. Her serious, always slightly sad grey eyes had deeply impressed him. Every time she brought him reports to sign, his heart sank. This had never happened to Lou before. He probably would never have dared to approach the unapproachable beauty if it were not for one incident. Lou suddenly became very ill and felt ill with the terrible flu. His temperature was off the scale and his whole body was aching. At the end of the day, his secretary entered his office and asked in a loud voice, "Our director is sick. He will not be here for a couple of days. Which of you can go to his house and take the documents to sign?" Of course, this was her responsibility, but she needed to pick up her child from kindergarten. She asked for help, and Alanis, who was always taciturn, suddenly said quietly, "I can do it. It's on my way anyway." Alanis herself did not understand why she decided to help. She just wanted to. She was not on her way, but she lied and went to the boss's country mansion. Lou was very sympathetic to Alanis, not only as a boss, but also as a fair, balanced person. He did not allow himself to snap at his staff and was respectful with everyone, from the cleaning lady to his deputy. So, learning about her boss's illness, Alanis really wanted to check on him and, if necessary, help. She took a cab to the boss's house, but nobody was there. She called on the phone, but there was no answer. Worried, Alanis pushed the massive door open and entered. She paced the rooms and shouted, "Lou, where are you? It's me, Alanis. I have the documents for you to sign." But no one answered her. Suddenly, Alanis heard a faint moan. She rushed to the second floor and found the director, who was lying wet and delirious on a huge bed. He was obviously delirious, and on the bedside table were pills of some kind. A frightened Alanis touched his forehead. It was just flaming. Then she threw the file and bag on the floor and rushed to the rescue of the sick man. She made him compresses, wiped his whole body, undressed Lou to his underwear, found an antipyretic mixture and literally forcibly poured it into his mouth. 3 hours later, she gave it him again. She could not leave her boss in such a state, so she called her mother, explained the situation, and her mother asked their family doctor to visit Lou. The doctor examined the man, diagnosed him, prescribed a treatment regimen, and left, assuring her that the patient would feel better in a couple of hours. Alanis stayed behind to guard the director at his house. In the morning, Lou finally felt better. He woke up and could not believe his eyes. Dozing on the chair beside his bed was Alanis, her face anxious and worried. All the time, he thought that Alanis talking to him was just a dream. Lou could barely speak. A hellish pain in his throat and lungs did not allow it. "Alanis, sweetheart, how are you here? What a miracle! This is the happiness I never dared to dream of." The girl immediately woke up. "Oh, you're awake. Oh, thank God. Your secretary sent me yesterday to ask you to sign some documents. I came and you were unconscious. I was so scared. I called my mother and she sent our family doctor. He calmed me down and told me to keep an eye on you until you got better. So I'm watching over your sleep. Well, since you're feeling better, I guess I'll be going. There's some chicken soup in the kitchen. Here's the doctor's prescription for you. If you like, I can run out and buy it for you." "Thank you, Alanis. You're my saviour. Mind you, I will not eat soup without you, so let's go to breakfast together." Alanis was embarrassed, but agreed. She really felt a tremendous hunger after all she had been through. The young people had breakfast together. Already leaving, Alanis timidly said, "Take care of yourself. Do you want me to come back tomorrow after work?" Lou joyfully answered, "I dream that you never left this house. I really like you, Alanis, so I'll be waiting." And so their relationship began. Lou was not the same as the passionate and ardent Mark. He reeked of strength, confidence and peace. A year later they got married. Sometime later, Alanis realized that she was pregnant. Her husband and parents were unspeakably happy, and Alanis was even slightly frightened to learn that she would have twins. But thank God the pregnancy proceeded without complications, and the time of delivery was approaching. Lou, being a responsible father, had thought of everything in detail, and even a leading professor in obstetrics was to deliver her baby over the phone. The man had already equipped the nursery and bought a fancy, expensive stroller and a wonderful cradle. Now he had stopped staying at work. But then, as bad luck would have it, Lou had to go urgently for a couple of days on a business trip to another city. A very lucrative deal was coming up, promising a lot of money if it was successfully signed. He couldn't trust anyone with this and decided to go by himself. Lou was anxious. "Alanis, my dear, let's go to the maternity hospital today just to be safe. I know it's still 4 weeks ahead, but still, it's winter. I won't be there with you. How can you be alone here? There's a TV and a shower in the ward, and doctors are on duty around the clock. That way I'll be calm." His wife hugged him tenderly, barely reaching him because of her huge belly, and reassured him. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. I feel great. My stomach doesn't hurt. I'm eating for 3, and I'll burst soon like a balloon. You'll be back the day after tomorrow. I don't want to go to the hospital. It's so good at home. I'll watch my favourite movies and sleep on my favourite bed. You know how hard it is for me to find a comfortable position, so the babies don't have a disco party inside me. Besides, my mum promised to come tomorrow. If anything, she'll stay overnight. So go and deal with your business. I left you sandwiches and coffee in the kitchen. Take them with you. You'll get hungry on the road." Lou kissed her belly, put his ear to it and whispered, "Goodbye, my little ones. Daddy will be home soon. Sit quietly there." Alanis laughed. His touching care always moved her. She saw him off and decided to rest. She lay down comfortably on the pillows and turned on a melodrama. But then the phone rang. It was her friend Lena. Alanis was pleased with the unexpected call, and the women started chatting non-stop. "Oh, I forgot to share the news about Mark. My acquaintance has told me," Lena exclaimed suddenly. "Mark's company burst like a soap bubble, and they even dragged him to court. At one point, he even started drinking heavily, but then he pulled himself together. He became a driver for an ordinary van, delivering mail around the city, and now he lives with his sick mother. She has a heart condition, and they say she needs surgery, and there's no money. That's the way it is. But who's to blame? He ruined his own life. He shouldn't have cheated on you." For some reason, Alanis felt sad. "You know, I still feel sorry for him. The first love is the strongest, no matter what." "Well, okay, Lena. I was glad to hear from you. Goodbye." Alanis got up, went to the window and gasped. 2 hours ago, it was quiet and sunny, but now there was a terrible blizzard, and nothing could be seen. "How's my beloved doing? Oh, Lord, I hope he can drive normally. God forbid anything happens to him." The woman prayed to the heavens. She grabbed her phone and called her husband. It was important for her to hear his voice, but she only heard, "Subscriber is unavailable." Alanis became even more nervous. Walking back and forth in the room, she had wound herself up to the limit. After all, it was a road. All these anxious thoughts made her stomach ache, and it became difficult to breathe. Her back hurt a lot, and then suddenly something warm poured down her legs. The frightened woman realized that her water had broken. She tried to call her husband again and again, but he was still unavailable. Alanis panicked and called her mother. She shouted in a voice that wasn't her own, "Mummy, my water broke. I'm in labour, and Lou left for a business trip just 2 hours ago. I can't reach him. There's probably no connection on the road. He begged me to go to the maternity hospital today, and I'm such an idiot I didn't listen. Mum, I'm scared. What should I do?" Helen did her best to calm her daughter, but her heart sank. "Don't panic. I'm calling an ambulance. The medics will be here soon." A couple of minutes later, she called her daughter again. "The ambulance is on its way. Pull yourself together. How are you feeling? Are the contractions frequent? Your father and I are also on our way. Hold on, breathe deeper.
We're nearby. Everything will be fine. Get your documents ready so everything is at hand." Alanis cried in fear and pain and whimpered, "Mummy, come quickly, I'm scared. Did you see the blizzard out there? What if the ambulance doesn't make it? Oh, how painful it is." Helen rushed around the house and shouted to her husband, "Bernard, hurry and start the car. Alanis is giving birth. And Lou is on a business trip. I already called the ambulance." The man jumped up like a rocket and ran to the garage without further ado. But when he saw what was happening outside, he ran back into the house. "I'm afraid we won't be able to leave the yard. There's a terrible blizzard out there. Oh, Lord, everything is against us. We need to do something." The woman hastily dressed and ran into the yard, where it was so snowy that you couldn't see anything within a meter. She grabbed a huge shovel and feverishly began to clear the snow. "I'll clear the road myself. I'll walk there, but I'll help my daughter." "Help! No time for chit-chat. My daughter is in trouble. This is all my fault. We should have insisted on going to the maternity hospital. Or at least come to her today, not tomorrow. At least she wouldn't be alone." They worked together to quickly clear the snow from the area and set out, taking shovels with them, knowing they would need them again. Meanwhile, Alanis was praying to God that the ambulance would arrive in time and take her to the maternity hospital. Finally, she heard a car honking outside, got dressed with her remaining strength, and almost crawled to the door, writhing in pain. She let the medics into the house and fell right onto the steps. The paramedic didn't lose his cool, rushed to the woman and moved her to the bed. He comforted her. "Don't panic, we'll help you. What's your name? How old are you? How often are the contractions? When did your water break? Don't panic, you're in reliable hands and everything will be fine. Breathe out. Good. And now, calmly, answer my questions." Alanis came to her senses a little and began to tell him everything in detail. The doctor examined her and shook his head. "Okay, labour is progressing. We'll be giving birth here, and we won't make it to the maternity hospital. That's for sure." "Why did you wait so long, my dear? You should have been at the maternity hospital a long time ago." Seeing the labouring woman's bulging, almost crazy eyes, he reassured her again. "I repeat, everything is going according to plan. You have no complications. Just listen to me. Don't panic, and we'll get through this together. Where can we get clean sheets and boiled water? Come on, exhale. Again. Again. Hold my hand. Think about how difficult it is for the babies right now. You'll help them come into the world." Surprisingly, everything went smoothly, and within an hour, Alanis gave birth to 2 babies, a boy and a girl, one after the other, with a difference of a couple of minutes. One cried right away, but the paramedic struggled with the other, pumping something out of him, spitting, shaking him, rubbing him, and finally the baby weakly cried. The paramedic exhaled. "Phew, you really scared me, little one. Alanis, stop crying. Everything is fine. You gave birth and the babies are alive. However, your boy is a bit weak, so we need to take you to the maternity hospital as soon as possible." Alanis took the paramedic's hand and said, "Thank you so much. I don't know how to thank you. You're my saviour. If it weren't for you, I have everything ready for the babies. Take everything from the drawer in the dresser over there." Then the phone rang, and it was Lou on the line. "Alanis, sweetheart, what happened? The connection is terrible. How are you? I missed so many calls from you." Alanis started crying again. "I gave birth to a boy and a girl. My labour started prematurely at home. Thank God the ambulance arrived in time and they helped with the delivery. Now they're taking me to the maternity hospital." Lou almost shouted, "Oh God, I told you to go to the hospital earlier, didn't I? I shouldn't have listened to you and taken you to the ward myself. I'm dropping everything and heading back. Honey, I'll be with you tomorrow. Screw everything else. Thank you, my love, for the babies. I can't believe I'm a dad now." After the conversation,
They got Alanis in the ambulance and drove to the hospital. The nurse held the babies, and Alanis finally calmed down a bit. Well, the worst is over. Now she can breathe a sigh of relief. Then her mother called. "Daughter, how are you? Where are you? I'll go mad soon. We're digging ourselves out with your father. We can't get on the road. Such things are happening here. I don't know how we'll get to you in the city." "Mummy, I've given birth. You're a grandma now," replied Alanis. "Congratulate Grandpa too. The ambulance paramedic helped with the delivery. They're taking me to the maternity hospital with the babies." Helen wiped the snow falling on her face with her hand and cried so loudly that Bernard was frightened and dropped the shovel, expecting something terrible. "What happened? What? Tell me!" The woman rushed to her husband and knocked him down on the snow. "You're a grandpa! Thank God! A boy and a girl! They're taking her to the maternity hospital." Bernard couldn't contain his joy. He hugged his wife tightly and kissed her. "Unbelievable! It seemed like I was a student myself yesterday, and now I'm a grandpa. 2 grandchildren at once. My poor little daughter. I can't even imagine how she endured all this alone." But as it turned out, it was too early to celebrate. More challenges were waiting for Alanis. The ambulance got stuck in the snow on the way. The roads were not cleared. For an hour, they tried to get the car out by themselves. The driver and the medics were soaked and exhausted, but the wheels only got stuck harder and deeper. They had to turn off the engine because it was already overheating. The driver tried to contact the dispatcher and report the emergency, while the panicked Alanis kept calling her mother and Lou, informing them of what had happened. Lou tried to call for a tow truck or a bulldozer. He was going crazy with worry and blamed himself every second for going on this damn business trip, leaving Alanis alone at home. Helen and her husband, having just rejoiced, panicked again. They kept asking the medic on which exact part of the road they got stuck, so they could somehow help their daughter. It was cold in the car, and Alanis was getting cold, and she was hugging her little ones to her chest to warm them. The woman panicked. "Will they get us out soon? And if not, what will happen to me and the children? The doctor said my son is weak. We'll freeze to death here. Oh, why am I so unlucky? One thing after another, and all in one day." 2 hours had passed. It was already dark outside, and no help had arrived. Even the calm doctor had become nervous and was cursing on the radio, shocked by the indifference of the utilities and officials. After all, they had reported to everyone they could, and then in the middle of the road, everyone saw the light of the headlights as a small van approached. The driver of the ambulance waved his hands, asking for help. A young man in a bulky hooded jacket climbed out of the cab. After listening to what was being said, without any conversation, began to help push the ambulance out. They tried both the front and the back, but nothing worked. Realizing that they couldn't get out this way, he hooked the ambulance car onto his van with a rope and started to pull it slowly. They struggled for another half hour, but they managed to push the ambulance car out. The van driver did not abandon the medics and the woman in labour, and he towed them to the maternity hospital, since the ambulance had long run out of gas. The man saw through the window how the medics ran out and the woman with children was taken on a stretcher to the ward. And only after that did he wave to them from afar and drive home. It was Mark, Alanis's former fiancé. By fate, it was he who happened to be on a deserted, snowy road that evening in his old van. He was just returning home after delivering mail and packages. Mark didn't even guess who was in the car. He helped just because he felt sorry for the woman in labour and the children who found themselves in such a predicament. The guy got wet, caught a cold, and fell asleep literally without any strength. At night, he had a high temperature, and his old mother could not bring it down on her own. The next day, he ended up in the hospital. It turned out that he had pneumonia. As for Alanis, she and the children were examined and everything was fine. Mum and Dad arrived, and in the morning her beloved husband came too. All the family members were happy that everything ended so well, and they congratulated the mother on the birth of her children. They took turns holding the babies and admiring them. "We must definitely find the driver of the van who pulled us out and thank him from the bottom of our hearts," said Alanis. "After all, if it weren't for him, we would definitely have frozen there until morning. Dad, will you help me with that? You have connections." But there was no need to search for anyone. A nurse who entered the ward and overheard Alanis and her father's conversation answered immediately, "Your saviour is lying in the next building with pneumonia. Such kindness doesn't happen every day. You and he are now celebrities." Alanis immediately jumped out of bed. "Mum, Lou, will you stay with the babies? I just want to express my gratitude to him, and that's it. We owe him our lives, and he caught a bad cold, apparently because of us." Alanis, in her robe and slippers, quietly walked into her saviour's ward. When she entered, she was simply amazed. It was Mark, her former fiancé, her first love. "Alanis, I can't believe my eyes," he asked in surprise. "What are you doing here? And in such a uniform?" The woman sat down on a chair and said, "It was you who saved me and my children yesterday. Thank you, Mark, from the heart. If it wasn't for you, we would definitely have frozen with my babies on a snowy road. How are you? The nurse said you have pneumonia." Mark waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. I was freezing and wet yesterday, but I'm feeling a bit better now. I'm glad I could help you, Alanis. It makes up for my past mistakes. I regretted it 100 times after. I've been looking for someone like you to start a family with, but I haven't found anyone. Congratulations on your children. Apparently, you found your love after all." "Yes, Mark, I found mine," Alanis answered. "I'm married to a kind and decent man named Lou. I'm not angry at you anymore, although it took me a while to get over your betrayal. But it's all in the past now. Let bygones be bygones. I hope you find love, get married and start a family." "I've given up on my personal life. I'm just trying to save up for my mother's surgery. She has heart problems and needs expensive treatment. I'm slowly saving up for it, but it's not enough." "Oh well, it's my problem. Don't worry about it. Congratulations, Alanis, and I'm sorry for everything." Alanis came back to the room, feeling sad, and looked at her mother. "Do you know who saved me yesterday? You'll never guess. It was Mark. Life is so unexpected. I can hardly believe it. He's changed so much. He's not the same person he used to be. Life must have been tough on him." Helen sighed, saying, "Well, maybe he's not such a bad person after all. Maybe he's capable of doing good things. We will visit him too." Lou felt a pang of jealousy. "What were you talking about for so long, Alanis? I'm terribly jealous of you. Remember, I won't give you up to anyone else. Do you still love him?" Alanis laughed and hugged her husband. "Darling, don't be ridiculous. You're my happiness, and I don't want anyone else. I loved Mark, that's true, but that was a long time ago. I only realized through you that a woman can truly be happy with someone who treasures her. I feel sorry for Mark. He lives with his sick mother and needs money for her operation. This is so sad." The babies woke up making funny faces, looking for a nipple and crying. Lou picked up the boy and held him while Alanis was feeding the girl. The man admired how beautiful a woman looked while breastfeeding. The baby made cute noises, and Alanis melted with love. She wanted to kiss the little nose and never let go. Helen and Bernard visited Mark. They talked and reconciled. They forgot their past hurts and forgave each other. At a family meeting, they decided to help Mark's sick mother by paying for her operation. Everything went well, and the woman recovered. Bernard hired Mark as a manager because he had good business sense. Mark's personal life improved too. He met a simple and modest woman named Pamela, who worked as a saleswoman in a supermarket. Maybe after talking to Alanis, Mark finally let her go and stopped looking for someone like her. He remembered his mistakes and was honest with Pamela. He enjoyed her soups and pies and didn't mind her plumpness or freckles. They sometimes walked in the park with Alanis, Lou and their children. The women found common ground and became friends. Their acquaintances and old friends were amazed at how fate intertwined their lives. But Alanis and her parents believed that everyone deserved a second chance. After all, we all make mistakes and commit indecent acts that we later regret. The main thing is to realize it and change yourself, to know how to ask for forgiveness and to forgive. Just stay human. That's the whole secret.